Chapter 3703. Night fell, and the divine ship stopped in a wasteland. On the deck of the divine ship stood a rather large stone statue, emitting a bright light that enveloped the entire divine ship. At night, the evil spirits let out continuous howls, eerie and strange. Everyone on the divine ship had long been accustomed to it, and did not feel that anything was wrong. Juon sat cross-legged in a room in the cabin. The room was not big, about 10 square meters or so. The decorations inside were also very simple, with a small bed and a wooden table. Other than that, there was nothing else. On the wooden table, there was a stone half the size of a palm that emitted a weak light. Juon held a blood-colored spike that was about an inch in size in his hand. This was the astral weapon fragment he had obtained from Yu Fu, the blood spike. Juon repeatedly observed this blood spike and found that there was nothing special about this blood spike other than its material being different from a heaven-breaking divine artifact. Let's take a look with my divine sense. Juon's eyes flickered as he derived his divine sense, intending to explore the blood spike. The moment Juon's divine sense entered the blood spike, he immediately felt a strong smell of blood. Then, he saw a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Countless corpses were piled up into a mountain, and the sky was raining blood. Suddenly, the blood clouds in the sky kept rolling. Juon saw a pair of incomparably scarlet eyes in the depths of the blood clouds, coldly looking down at Juon. Lowly person, do you want to obtain incomparably powerful strength? If you do, then offer your soul to me, and then collect enough souls for me. As long as you can complete the task I give you and feed me, I will bestow you with supreme power. Juon looked indifferently at this pair of eyes. He vaguely guessed that this thing might be the artifact spirit of this blood spike. Moreover, this artifact spirit's intelligence was very high, and it actually called itself I. However, what Juon did not expect was that in order to control this blood spike, he actually had to offer his soul. Didn't this mean that he had to become the slave of this astral weapon before he could use it? You've got your priorities mixed up. This was no longer a case of a man commanding an army, but an army commanding a man. Are you talking about the blood sacrifice? Juon asked indifferently. He. You're very smart. That's right. I need 3 stages of blood sacrifice. The first stage requires 10,000 souls, and we've only gathered 4,000 souls. We're still short of 6,000. If you sacrifice nearly 6,000 people for me, I will grant you the supreme power. The cold voice came from the bloody cloud again, shaking the entire bloody world. Juon sneered, feeling even more disgusted with these astral soldiers. Even if he knew that this was a world where the strong were respected, where the weak were prey to the strong, and that the lives of mortals were cheap. However, he really couldn't bring himself to kill those weak mortals for no reason. Even if he obtained a star weapon, he would not do so because this was a matter of principle. I'm sorry, but you're just a weapon. Since I've obtained you, you have to respect me as your master. Your power is mine. Juon said indifferently. The eyes in the bloody cloud suddenly widened. After a moment of silence, it suddenly let out a loud laughter that shook the entire world. Lowly human, are you making me laugh? I'm the astral weapon spirit from the immemorial star system. You're just a lowly human. You were born to be my slave, and now you dare to ask me to respect you as my master? You're courting death. As it spoke, the bloody cloud suddenly tumbled. Soon after, the bloody cloud began to sink crazily, forming a bloody mouth. This bloody mouth was so big that it seemed to be able to swallow the entire earth. Juon's expression changed slightly. He felt an unprecedented and terrifying pressure crushing his body. The powerful pressure seemed to crush him, making him unable to move. He could only tremble slightly and stare stiffly at the bloody mouth that was getting closer and closer. Juon's heart sank. He had been too careless and underestimated the blood thorn weapon spirit. In this weapon spirit world, it was indeed inappropriate for his spiritual soul to enter without permission. Fortunately, Juon had only sent a part of his spiritual soul here. However, Even if this part of his spiritual soul was destroyed, it would still cause a lot of damage to Zhuowen. When Zhuowen watched the bloody mouth swallow him, he suddenly felt a strange energy. A strange purple light erupted from his body. Soon after, a mysterious purple mark appeared between his eyebrows. The purple mark spun rapidly and then turned into an ordinary stone. The moment Zhuowen saw the stone, his pupils involuntarily shrank. He was very familiar with this stone. It was the Tai word stone of the immemorial primordial stone. After the stone had fused with his soul, it had never appeared again. As soon as the Tai word stone appeared, a blazing purple light instantly filled the entire world. The originally blood-red world was completely replaced by purple. As for the bloody mouth formed by the blood cloud, it collapsed under the purple light. What kind of power is this? This power, could it be the immemorial primordial stone? No. How could a lowly human like you have such a thing? The blood cloud dispersed with a loud rumble and instantly fled into the distance. The voice that came from it was filled with terror and fear. The Tai word stone seemed to have a mind of its own. With a whoosh, it escaped and caught up with the bloody cloud. Zhuowen only heard the blood-curdling screeches from the blood cloud before he discovered that the blood cloud had been completely absorbed by the high symbol stone. There was no longer any trace left behind. In the dark room, Zhuowen suddenly opened his eyes. His forehead was dripping with cold sweat. The scene just now was too thrilling. If not for the Tai word stone's sudden power, that part of his spiritual soul would have been destroyed. The Tai word stone? Zhuowen suddenly noticed a stone emitting purple light floating in front of him. It was the Tai word stone he saw in the blood thorn weapon spirit world. What shocked Zhuowen even more was that the Tai word stone was attached to the bloody thorn and was actually devouring it. Zhuowen could faintly hear the blood-curdling screams coming from within the blood thorn. Soon, he discovered that the blood thorn had completely disintegrated into powder, while the high symbol stone had fallen into Zhuowen's right palm. Zhuowen felt a heart-wrenching pain coming from his palm. However, this pain came and went quickly. When he looked again, Zhuowen discovered that a purple mark had appeared on his palm. This mark was exactly the same as the bloody thorn, only the color was different. After the Tai word stone left this mark, it turned into a purple light and returned to the depths of Zhuowen's forehead. Zhuowen stared blankly at the blood thorn mark on his palm. With a thought, the mark emitted a purple light, and a broken thorn floated in his palm. Chapter 3704. What is the origin of the immemorial primordial stone? It can even devour the astral weapon that was left behind from the immemorial star system. It can even replicate the astral weapon's power on its host. Zhuowen took a deep breath and regained his composure. If the immemorial primordial stone could devour the astral weapon, its origin must be much greater than what Zhuowen had guessed. From now on, this mark shall be called the purple thorn. Zhuowen looked at the purple mark on his palm and was in a good mood. The purple thorn originated from the astral weapon, the blood thorn. Although it was broken, it still possessed great power. Zhuowen had a feeling that if he could find the other astral weapon fragments, he would be able to obtain more of the astral weapon's power with the help of the Tai word stone. Rumble. Suddenly, the divine ship shook violently. Zhuowen frowned and stood up. He opened the cabin door and went to the deck. On the deck, many guards rushed to the edge of the divine ship and set up cannons. Zhuowen then realized that it was already morning outside. Just as the divine ship rose into the sky, 3 divine ships appeared in front of them and blocked their path. The 3 divine ships in front of them shot out energy cannons and landed densely on the divine ship that they were on. Although the divine ship had a powerful energy shield, it couldn't withstand the attacks of the energy cannons. Many ripples appeared on the energy shield. The entire divine ship was shaking violently, like a small boat in the middle of the ocean. Miss Fan Shuang, what is going on? Zhuowen asked Fan Shuang, who was commanding the battle at the edge of the deck. They are from the Yunjin Lord Mansion. Our whereabouts have been exposed. Fan Shuang's beautiful eyes were filled with misery. She could see that the three divine ships in front of them were each commanded by a feudal god transformation realm expert. Their merchant group only had Chun Liang, who was at the feudal god transformation realm. They were at a complete disadvantage. If the three divine ships caught up with them, their merchant group would be doomed. At this moment, Chun Liang leaped forward with 3 golden talismans in his right hand. Immediately, the 3 talismans turned into 3 different directions and entered the 3 divine ships. They turned into 3 golden rings of light, binding the 3 divine ships within. Let's go. My golden circle talisman won't last much longer. Chun Liang landed back on the deck and drove the divine ship with all his might. Instantly, it fled in another direction. About a quarter of an hour later, they could no longer see any traces of the 3 divine ships. On the deck, Lin Hu and a large group of guards were so scared that they fell to the ground. Just now, they had faced 3 embryonic divine transformation powerhouses. Each one of them could have easily crushed them. Fortunately, they were out of danger now. We were obviously on a secret mission. How did the Yunjin Lord's mansion find out about our whereabouts? Fan Shuang's face paled as her chest heaved up and down. I'm afraid there must be a spy among us. The divine ships of a Yunjin Lord's mansion came just in time, and they attacked us at the right time. If they didn't know about our whereabouts and departure time in advance, they wouldn't have been so precise, Chun Liang said with a sinister look. As soon as he said that, Lin Hu and the rest were shocked. They looked around and tried to determine who could be the spy. In an instant, everyone scattered like birds startled by the twang of a bow. Fan Shuang's eyes narrowed. She wasn't a fool. The moment the divine ships of a Yunjin Lord's mansion appeared, she knew that there was a spy among them. Miss Fan Shuang, our brothers here are all trustworthy, and we are all familiar with their backgrounds. However, we don't know about this guy. I heard that he is an outsider from Green Elephant Village. Chun Liang suddenly pointed at Zhuowen and said in a deep voice. Everyone's eyes fell on Zhuowen. Lin Hu and the rest looked at him with disdain and hostility. Chun Liang was the only embryonic divine transformation powerhouse in their group. To them, Chun Liang's words had an inexplicable authority. In an instant, everyone distanced themselves from Zhuowen. Their eyes were filled with hostility. Fan Shuang also stared at Zhuowen. She couldn't help but think of the night when Zhuowen had left the group alone in Green Elephant Village. In her eyes, Zhuowen was indeed the most suspicious person. Zhuowen looked at Chun Liang coldly. He had not expected the latter to accuse him of being a thief. However, Zhuowen did not say anything. He knew that it was useless to say anything now. Everyone had already pointed the finger at him. No one would believe his words. Miss Fan Shuang, do you also suspect that I am the spy? Zhuowen stared at Fan Shuang. Fan Shuang's eyes flickered. However, she turned her face away and did not look at Zhuowen. You spy. Are you still trying to deny it? I'll just capture you. Chun Liang grinned. The aura of the embryonic divine transformation realm surged out, and he flew toward Zhuowen. Zhuowen's eyes turned cold. However, the corner of his lips curled up into a mocking smile. This Chun Liang was simply courting death. He actually dared to attack him. Lin Fan would not hold back at all. Manager Chun, stop. Fan Shuang suddenly stood in front of Zhuowen and shouted. Chun Liang stopped in his tracks and said with a sinister look, Miss Fan Shuang, you are still protecting this person at a time like this. Have you been bewitched by him? Fan Shuang did not answer Chun Liang. Instead, she turned around and looked at Zhuowen. Zhuowen, you should leave. You know that you are the most suspicious person. The caravan can no longer tolerate you. Zhuowen looked deeply at Fan Shuang. He smiled faintly and did not say anything. Then, he jumped out of the deity ship and left the caravan. Miss Fan Shuang, you are letting the tiger return to the mountain. This Zhuowen is really a person who knows his face, but not his heart. So, he sneaked into our escort team to deliver information to the Yunjin Lord mansion. What a jerk. That's right. That's right. One ungrateful guy. Lin Hu and the other escorts snorted at Zhuowen and could not help but scold him. Chun Liang frowned. His gaze towards Fan Shuang turned even colder. This woman always got in his way. If it was not for the fact that he did not want to expose his identity, he would have captured this woman and ravaged her. Fan Shuang, you won't be able to be proud for long. However, it was a pity that the ant had escaped. Oomph. Chun Liang thought to himself. The people on the deity ship quickly reorganized themselves. Chun Liang restarted the deity ship and flew towards Yunjin Lord City. About 4 hours later, the 3 deity ships of the Yunjin Lord Mansion suddenly appeared from behind the mountain ridge and intercepted them. What is going on? How did they catch up with us? Lin Hu and the other escorts were in a panic and could not believe what they were seeing. The 3 deity ships were obviously lying in ambush. They obviously knew their flight path and had been waiting for them at the mountain ridge. Quick, prepare the cannons to fire. Lin Hu shouted at the other escorts. However, just as he finished speaking, he was hit by a blast of energy. He was smashed to the stern of the ship and spat out blood. The escorts were shocked and looked at Chun Liang in disbelief. Chapter 3705. Chun Liang looked at Fan Shuang and said, Miss Fan Shuang, you must have guessed that I am the traitor. Otherwise, you wouldn't have let Zhuowen leave. Fan Shuang smiled bitterly and said, Yes, I guessed it was you. I didn't say anything because you were too strong. All of us are no match for you. Chun Liang laughed and said, Miss Fan Shuang, you are really smart. You guessed it was me, but you didn't say anything. Are you using this time to think of a plan? And you're really kind-hearted. You actually beat Zhuowen at his own game and let him escape. However, he is just a useless piece of trash. He is not worth mentioning. Suddenly, Chun Liang's face changed. He looked at Fan Shuang seriously and said coldly, You guessed my identity long ago. That means you let Zhuowen go on purpose so that he could return to the Clear Heart Society and pass the message to you? Fan Shuang laughed and said, Chun Liang, you found out too late. You betrayed the Clear Heart Society. The Clear Heart Society will not let you go. Chun Liang's face turned ugly. At this moment, 3 figures descended from the 3 divine ships in front of them and landed on the deck of the divine ship that Chun Liang was on. The 3 of them were 2 men and 1 woman. A middle-aged scholar walked in front. Chun Liang, you have done a great service. When you return to the Yunjin territory, the Grand Lord will reward you handsomely. The middle-aged scholar said with satisfaction, I didn't expect Commander Song to come personally. I am flattered. When Chun Liang saw the middle-aged scholar, his face changed and he bowed respectfully. The middle-aged scholar was called Song Yuhong. He was the commander of the guards of the Yunjin territory, and he had a high position in the Yunjin territory. Moreover, Song Yuhong's cultivation was higher than Chun Liang's. He was already at the peak of the fetal god transformation realm, and his strength was much stronger than Chun Liang's. As for the man and woman behind Song Yuhong, there were also powerhouses at the fetal divine transformation realm. This could be called a formidable lineup. When Fan Shuang saw Song Yuhong, her face was filled with despair. She knew that they would not be able to escape this time. Unless the Clear Heart Society sent experts to rescue them, they would not be able to escape. Bang! Suddenly, a figure landed on the deck. The sound of the soles of the feet hitting the deck was not loud, but at this moment, it was clear and melodious. Everyone followed the voice, and their gazes fell on the figure that had just appeared. Zhuowen, why are you back? Fan Shuang's pupils shrank to the size of needles as she said in exasperation. However, Chun Liang laughed loudly and said, the heavens are really helping me. This ant is really stupid. He actually dares to come back at such a time. Looks like he's here to die. Song Yuhong and the 2 people behind him only looked at Zhuowen. When they found that Zhuowen was only at the 5th blight, they looked at him with disdain. Miss Fan Shuang, didn't I tell you before? The reason why I joined your caravan was to hitch a ride. As long as we reach Yunjin territory, your caravan will have nothing to do with me. However, since they have yet to reach Yunjin territory, the caravan is naturally related to me. I, Zhuowen, will definitely get involved in this matter. Zhuowen said calmly. However, Fan Shuang's face was ashen. She knew that it was all over. Zhuowen, the only person who could report back to the Clear Heart Society, had come back to die. In that case, the Clearheart Society's business department would be kept in the dark. As long as Chun Liang injured her and went back to fabricate a reason, Chun Liang would be able to sneak back into the Clearheart Society and continue to be a spy. If Chun Liang, this poisonous bug, was not eliminated, the Clearheart Society would definitely suffer in the future. Thinking of this, Fan Shuang looked at Zhuowen with resentment. Before Zhuowen left, she had already secretly sent a message to Zhuowen. However, she did not expect that Zhuowen would come back to die. She really could not understand this. However, Chun Liang laughed. His mouth was full of mockery. He looked coldly at Zhuowen and said, "You're going to get involved? You a fifth blight trash? Haha, are you trying to make me laugh to death? You really don't know your place. The ones who don't know their place are the four of you. I'll give the four of you a chance. If you scram now, I won't do anything and will spare your lives." Zhuowen said calmly. The moment he said that, the entire divine ship fell silent. The way everyone looked at Zhuowen instantly changed. It was as if they were looking at an idiot. F***CK, is this Zhuowen crazy? Even if he wants to die, this is not the way to do it. Lin, who was dumbfounded. Fan Shuang sat on the ground dejectedly. She did not even want to look at Zhuowen anymore, because she knew that Zhuowen was dead for sure. I misjudged him back then. I thought that this Zhuowen was a smart person. I did not expect that he would overestimate his place. Fan Shuang laughed bitterly. However, Chun Liang laughed loudly and said, "Spare our lives? Zhuowen, there is indeed something wrong with your brain. A mere fifth blight, and actually dares to say such arrogant words. Are you in a hurry to die?" Song Yuhong, on the other hand, stood at the side and sized up Zhuowen with interest. "Brother Chun, don't beat him to death. After beating him half to death, leave him to me. I've been researching a lot of new torture tools recently, and I just happen to lack a test subject," Song Yuhong said calmly. Chun Liang's eyes narrowed. He knew Song Yuhong's personality. He was a cruel and violent guy who loved to torture others. When he was in the Yunjin Lord's manor, Song Yuhong had tortured countless cultivators to death. His fierce reputation was well known throughout the entire Yunjin Lord's manor. Thinking of this, Chun Liang looked at Zhuowen with pity. Being targeted by Song Yuhong, Zhuowen was in for a tough time. "Brother Song, don't worry. I will leave this ant half to you. Watch me cripple him in one move." Chun Liang snickered and took a step forward. His entire body vanished on the spot like a ghost. In just an instant, Chun Liang's ghostly figure appeared behind Zhuowen. He clenched his right hand into a fist and punched toward Zhuowen's lumbar spine. Chun Liang's punch was extremely powerful. The fist force formed a wave-like shadow that rolled over. Zhuowen stood calmly on the spot, as if he did not notice that Chun Liang had appeared behind him. The gap between us is too big. You can't even keep up with my speed now. What do you have to fight me?" Chun Liang's eyes were full of disdain. The terrifying fist force was like a meteor that landed on Zhuowen's lumbar spine. However, just as his fist force was about to land on Zhuowen's spine, a terrifying sword intent surged over, instantly causing Chun Liang's entire body to freeze from shock. Slash! A sword shadow flashed past his right arm. Immediately, blood splattered out. Chun Liang's eyes narrowed as he realized that his right arm had been cut into two by the terrifying sword shadow. The sword shadow was too fast. The moment Chun Liang's right arm was cut off, the sword body immediately turned around and pierced Chun Liang's chest, pinning him to the deck. Chun Liang spat out a mouthful of blood. It was only then that he realized the true face of the sword shadow. He saw that the surface of the sword shadow was burning with a green flame. The temperature of the flame was extremely high. It burned fiercely in his body and constantly eroded his vitality. He could only barely resist the terrifying green flame. The intense pain caused his forehead to be covered in cold sweat. He looked in shock at Zhuowen, who was slowly turning around. His eyes were filled with horror. "This guy, what kind of monster is he? He actually managed to severely injure me in one move." Chapter 3706. Oh my God, are my eyes playing tricks on me? Why do I feel like Lord Chun Liang has been defeated in one move? Lin, who was so scared that he fell to the ground and kept rubbing his eyes. Lin, whose voice naturally attracted Fan Shuang's attention. She could not bear to look at Zhuowen. Now that she heard Lin Hu's voice, she could not help but look over. What she saw stunned her. Chun Liang's chest had been pierced by a sword shadow, and he was pinned to the deck. He could not move at all. On the other hand, Zhuowen stood tall with his foot on Chun Liang. His expression was indifferent, as if he had just done something insignificant. I underestimated him. Fan Shuang's eyes lit up as she murmured. Song Yuhong and the other two's faces suddenly became serious. Chun Liang was at the late stage of the fetal god transformation realm, but he had been defeated so easily. There is no doubt that this person's strength was at least at the peak of the fetal god transformation realm. Song Yuhong cupped his fists at Zhuowen and said cautiously, "My friend, you are very powerful. We do not want to have a direct confrontation with you. How about this? We will give you some compensation. If you let Brother Chun Liang go and hand these people over to me, we will be even. Also, I forgot to tell you that we are from the Yunjin Lord's Mansion. You can say that the entire Yunjin territory is under the jurisdiction of the Yunjin Lord's Mansion. I think you're a smart person. You will not take the risk of offending the Yunjin Lord's Mansion to meddle in other people's business." Zhuowen grinned and said coldly, "The Yunjin Lord's Mansion? I really don't care about it. Also, didn't you hear what I said just now? If you had left in time, I would not have attacked you. Since I have attacked you, all of you will die. Moreover, it is not the first time I have killed people from the Yunjin Lord's Mansion." Having said that, Zhuowen waved his right hand. Suddenly, the spiritual sword essence that was pinned to Chun Liang's body burst out with a terrifying green lotus flame. Amidst the blazing flames, Chun Liang let out a miserable shriek before he was burned to ashes by the green lotus flames. Whoosh! The divine soul sword intent circled around Zhuowen, like the most important guard. On the other hand, Zhuowen walked toward Song Yuhong and the other two. "Sir, what should we do?" The man and woman behind Song Yuhong clenched their fists tightly when they saw Zhuowen walking over. They were extremely nervous. They were only at the middle fetal divine transformation realm. Even Chun Liang, whose cultivation was higher than theirs, had been easily dealt with by this Zhuowen. The two of them definitely weren't his match. Now, they were waiting for Song Hongyu's decision. Let's attack together. No matter how strong this person is, he won't be a match for the three of us. Song Hongyu ordered coldly. The man and woman nodded and released their strongest power, flying towards Zhuowen. Song Hongyu, on the other hand, retreated without hesitation the moment the man and woman flew towards Zhuowen and fled in the opposite direction. "What? My lord!" The man and woman immediately noticed that Song Hongyu had fled. They immediately knew that they had been abandoned by Song Hongyu. However, they had already launched their attack. If they retracted it now, they feared they would be severely injured by the backlash. They could only continue to attack Zhuowen. Zhuowen took a step forward, his figure turning into a strange purple shadow. Then, purple snow began to fall from the horizon. Puff, puff. The divine soul sword intent was extremely fast. It instantly pierced through the man and woman's attacks and pierced between their eyebrows, destroying their divine souls. As for Zhuowen, he didn't slow down at all and chased after Song Hongyu. Song Hongyu's speed was indeed good, but it still couldn't compare to Zhuowen's movement technique, purple snow. Before long, Zhuowen had caught up to Song Hongyu. Song Hongyu also knew that his movement technique couldn't compare to Zhuowen's, so there was no point in continuing to run. Therefore, Song Hongyu suddenly turned around and took out a bronze spear from his spirit ring, stabbing it towards Zhuowen. Rip! The bronze spear's power was extraordinary. The moment it stabbed back, an extremely terrifying explosion resounded in the air. It was like a chain reaction of continuous explosions. Zhuowen's eyes were cold. He formed a sword technique with his hand, raised it above his head, and slashed it down. The divine soul sword intent that surrounded him followed his sword technique and slashed down on the bronze spear. The green lotus flame burned fiercely like a bloody mouth, completely swallowing and melting the bronze spear. What? Song Yuhong's mind was greatly shaken. This bronze spear was a level 1 heaven-breaking divine tool, yet it was actually easily destroyed by this divine soul sword intent. Didn't that mean that this divine soul sword intent was much stronger than this bronze spear? And it was also at the moment when Song Yuhong was shocked that Zhuowen's right hand pointed at his forehead. Once again, he took out a divine soul sword intent and stabbed it into Song Yuhong's heart with lightning speed. You can actually use a second divine soul sword intent like this. Song Yuhong was completely unprepared for the second divine soul sword intent. He was pierced by the divine soul sword intent, and the endless green lotus flame ignited his entire body. Song Yuhong let out a heart-wrenching scream. Soon after, he was completely burned to ashes in the raging green lotus flame. After completely destroying Song Yuhong, Zhuowen unceremoniously stored Song Yuhong's 3 divine ships into the macro world. The 3 divine ships were of a lower level than the divine ship that Gong Ji Lu and NIC were on. The configuration inside was also more detailed. However, the 3 divine ships contained a lot of resources. To Zhuowen, it was a big gain. If he wanted to go to other places in the future, it would be much more convenient with the divine ships. When Zhuowen landed on the deck of the divine ship where Fan Shuang and the others were, whether it was Fan Shuang or Lin Hu, the first thing they did was to look at Zhuowen from afar. Their eyes were filled with uncertainty, and they didn't dare to get close to Zhuowen. "Let's continue on our journey," Zhuowen said indifferently as he walked towards the bottom of the ship. "Zhuowen, who are you?" Fan Shuang suddenly blocked in front of Zhuowen. Her beautiful eyes looked at Zhuowen with a complicated expression. She still felt like she was in a dream. Zhuowen, who was only at the 5th heaven's blight, had actually killed Chun Liang, Song Yuhong, and the other 3 divine transformation realm experts in front of them. Fan Shuang couldn't figure out how Zhuowen had managed to get here. What was Zhuowen's identity? How could he be so powerful? Zhuowen looked at Fan Shuang indifferently and said, "It's best if you don't ask too much about my matters. You just have to remember that I'm only here to hitch a ride. When we reach Yunjin City, we'll go our separate ways." With that, Zhuowen walked around Fan Shuang and entered the cabin. "Zhuowen, thank you for saving all of us." Chapter 3707. In the huge hall of the Yunjin Territorial Lord's mansion, a middle-aged man in a purple robe had his hands behind his back as he chatted cheerfully with an old man with white hair and a youthful complexion. "Territorial Lord Yu, I have to congratulate you first. Now that you've obtained the goods that the Ji Prefecture Governor requested the Clear Heart Society to transport, I'm afraid that the Ji Prefecture Governor will blame the Clear Heart Society. When the time comes, the Clear Heart Society will be suppressed by the Ji Prefecture Governor. When the time comes, Territorial Lord, you can take the opportunity to attack the Clear Heart Society and get rid of this troublesome hot potato." The old man with white hair and a youthful complexion laughed as he congratulated the purple-robed middle-aged man. The purple-robed man was the Territorial Lord of Yunjin Territory, Yu Qianxiang, who was also Yu Fu's father. The old man with white hair and a youthful complexion was called Di Wenxing. He was not from Yunjin Territory, but from the Ji Prefecture Governor's side. The Ji Prefecture Governor's territory was 1 level higher than Yunjin Territory. Simply put, Yunjin Territory was only a small area under the Ji Prefecture Governor's jurisdiction. Within the Ji Prefecture Governor's territory, there were many other places similar to Yunjin Territory. Each place had its own territorial lord. Yu Qianxiang was still quite cautious when he faced Di Wenxing. Although the old man before him had the same cultivation level as him and was an old acquaintance, he was still from the Ji Prefecture Governor's side. His status and outlook were much higher than Yu Qianxiang's, so Yu Qianxiang did not dare slight him. "It's all thanks to Brother Di for tipping me off this time. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known in advance that the Ji Prefecture Governor was transporting such important goods for the Clear Heart Society," Yu Qianxiang said respectfully. Di Wenxing shook his head and said, "Territorial Lord Yu, you're being too polite. Even if I didn't say anything, the spy you planted in the Clear Heart Society would have. I was just the icing on the cake. I also heard that you seem to have obtained a star weapon fragment. Territorial Lord you. Tianxiang's gaze froze before he said naturally, "To be honest, Brother D, I did obtain a star weapon fragment by accident. However, I've already given this fragment to my beloved daughter for her to merge with it." Di Wenxing looked deeply at Yu Tianxiang and said with a smile, "Territorial Lord Yu's actions are quite fast. I see that your daughter hasn't been in the residence for the past few days. She must have gone for a blood sacrifice." Yu Tianxiang nodded, but did not answer. He was a little uncertain about the purpose of Di Wenxing's visit. Could it be that this old friend of his was here for the astral weapon fragment that he had obtained? Thinking of this, Yu Tianxiang frowned slightly, but his expression did not look good. Di Wenxing noticed the change in Yu Tianxiang's expression and said with a faint smile, "Don't worry, Territorial Lord Yu. You and I have known each other for a while now. I won't take away your opportunity so casually. The reason why I came here uninvited this time is actually for the Clear Heart Society. Perhaps Lord Yu still doesn't know that there is a small fragment of a star weapon in the Clear Heart Society." Yu Tianxiang's pupil shrank. He really didn't know that there would be astral weapon fragments in the Clear Heart Society. "Brother Di, are you serious?" Yu Tianxiang asked with a frown. Di Wenxing laughed and said, "Of course it's true. I got this information from the Ji Prefecture's Spirit Master of Words. I'm the only one who knows this information. Lord Yu, hasn't the Ming Xian Society always been a thorn in your side? This time, I'm here to help you get rid of the Clear Heart Society. I don't want any of the Clear Heart Society's resources. I only want that astral weapon fragment." Yu Tianxiang frowned slightly and gave Di Wenxing a deep look. He had obtained the Bloodthorn fragment before, so he knew how powerful and rare an astral weapon fragment was. In his eyes, the entire Clear Heart Society's resources could not be compared to a small fragment of an earth weapon fragment. "Lord Yu, apart from this, I'm also willing to give you a second-stage, heaven-breaking divine weapon. Do you want to make this deal? If you don't, I'll spread the news." Di Wenxing said faintly. Yu Tianxiang smiled bitterly. Di Wenxing had already put it this way, so he had no choice but to agree to it. However, Yu Tianxiang had already made up his mind. After he got rid of the Clear Heart Society, he would choose to kill Di Wenxing if he had the chance. Then he would snatch that item. Of course, before the Clear Heart Society was destroyed, he would naturally cooperate with Di Wenxing. Di Wenxing looked at Yu Tianxiang's uncertain expression, and a mocking smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Suddenly, a guard hurried in from outside the hall. "What's the matter? Why are you in such a hurry?" Yu Tianxiang looked at the guard with dissatisfaction and spoke in an extremely harsh tone. The guard trembled and hurriedly said, "Lord, something bad has happened. We can't contact Lord Songhong Yu and the others now. I'm afraid they're already dead." Yu Tianxiang stood up abruptly with a shocked and angry expression on his face. Let's go to the birth chart hall and see if Songhong Yu and the others' birth charts are still there." Yu Tianxiang had an ominous premonition. He hurriedly stepped out of the hall and walked toward the birth chart hall. The birth chart hall was a place that stored the life jade tokens of important people in the Yunjin Overlord Mansion. As long as the life jade token was destroyed, it meant that the owner of the life jade token had died. Di Wenxing sat silently in the hall. He looked at Yu Tianxiang's back with great interest and did not follow him. "Lord," outside the birth chart Great Hall, the two guards bowed respectfully when they saw Yu Tianxiang rushing over. Yu Tianxiang did not even look at the two guards. Instead, he pushed the door open and entered the birth chart hall. Soon after, Yu Tianxiang found the life jade tokens of Songhong Yu and the others. Without exception, all of their life jade tokens were shattered. How is this possible? Songhong Yu is a peak fetal divine transformation realm expert. Coupled with the help of two mid-stage fetal divine transformation realm experts and Chen Liang, the caravan should have been taken down easily. How? Yu Tianxiang clenched his fists. His expression was terrifyingly gloomy. He turned around and planned to leave the birth chart hall. He wanted to thoroughly investigate this matter and find out who killed Song Hong Yu and the others. If he found out who it was, he would make sure the murderer died without a burial place. However, as soon as Yu Tianxiang stepped out of the door, he casually glanced at the rows of life jade tokens in front of the main entrance. The life jade tokens at the main entrance were the best location in the birth chart hall. Most of the life jade tokens were placed there. Even Yu Tianxiang's life jade token was placed there. However, when he glanced at the life jade tokens, he was stunned. This was because he discovered that 2 of the life plates in the main gate had shattered. When he saw the names on the life jade tokens, he could not help but shout in anger. One of the life jade tokens belonged to his daughter, Yu Fu, and the other was his nephew, Eugene. Yu Qianxiang was about to go crazy. In such a short time, several of his capable generals had died inexplicably. Chapter 3708. For the next period of time, Zhuowen basically stayed in the cabin to study the purple thorn. The purple thorn had indeed inherited all the abilities of the astral weapon blood thorn. Moreover, the rarest thing was that it did not require a blood sacrifice to unleash the power of the purple thorn. However, Zhuowen discovered that the energy required to unleash the purple thorn was extremely terrifying. Of course, the power it brought was also extremely impressive. After this period of time, Zhuowen could also tell that the purple thorn's power was slightly stronger than the half-moon Godfire spear, but not by much. After all, the blood thorn absorbed by the Tai Word Stone was not complete. It was only a fragment of the astral weapon. Thinking of this, Zhuowen became extremely fearful of the astral weapon. Just a small piece of it already possessed such terrifying power. If it was a complete astral weapon, its power would be truly terrifying. I have also completely mastered the purple thorn. Zhuowen stood up and opened the cabin door. He planned to look for Fan Shuang. The Clear Heart Society was a major power in the Yunjin territory, second only to the Yunjin Territory Lord's Mansion. Fan Shuang had some status in the Clear Heart Society and should know more than Yuan of the Yuan tribe. He planned to get as much information as possible from Fan Shuang. He wanted to find out if there was anything in the world that could weaken the heaven-crushing calamity. When Zhuowen walked out of the cabin, he discovered that the surroundings were pitch black and there were strange and evil sounds coming from the surroundings. In the middle of the deck, there was a stone statue that emitted a bright light. Fan Shuang, Lin Hu and the rest were sitting cross-legged around the stone statue. Fan Shuang sat quietly and did not say a word. It was as if she was thinking about something. On the other hand, Lin Hu and the rest were whispering to each other as if they were discussing something. However, when Zhuowen appeared on the deck, Lin Hu and the rest of the guards fell silent. "Good evening, Lord Zhuo." Lin Hu quickly stood up and bowed to Zhuowen. The rest of the guards followed Lin Hu's example and bowed to Zhuowen. Their attitude was extremely humble. Ever since Zhuowen had domineeringly killed Chung Liang and the other embryonic god transformation powerhouses, in the hearts of Lin Hu and the others, Zhuowen was a godlike existence. They didn't dare to slight such a powerhouse. Zhuowen nodded and walked towards Fan Shuang. When Lin Hu and the others saw Zhuowen's actions, they tactfully distanced themselves from Fan Shuang, giving Zhuowen and Fan Shuang a chance to be alone. Fan Shuang stared at Zhuowen warily. Zhuowen sat beside Fan Shuang. Before he could speak, Fan Shuang spoke first. "Zhuowen, you should be a spirit transformation realm expert, right? With your strength, you can do whatever you want even in Yunjin City. Why did you accept our caravan's recruitment and become a small guard? What is your goal?" Fan Shuang stared at Zhuowen. Zhuowen was stunned. He immediately smiled and said, "Lady Fan Shuang, you can rest assured. I have no ill intentions toward your caravan or the Clear Heart Society. To tell you the truth, I'm a cultivator who just came up from the lower realm not long ago. I really don't know anything about the 100 domains. My goal in going to Yunjin City is very simple. I want to learn more about this world from the main city. Lady Fan Shuang, if I wanted to attack you, I wouldn't have to go through so much trouble to kill the traitor and the people from the Yunjin City Lord's Mansion. This is obviously disadvantageous to me, isn't it?" Hearing this, Fan Shuang nodded. The doubt in her eyes was completely dispelled. She could see the sincerity in Zhuowen's eyes. I see. However, Zhuowen, you are indeed very powerful. You just came up from the lower realm, and you already have a spirit transformation realm cultivation. This is very rare in the 100 domains. Your talent is considered good even in the 100 domains. Fan Shuang exclaimed. Zhuowen said awkwardly, Lady Fan Shuang, you might have misunderstood. My cultivation hasn't reached the spirit transformation realm. As you can see, I am only at the peak of the 5th decay. Fan Shuang's body suddenly froze. She looked as if she had seen a ghost as she sized up Zhuowen. What kind of joke was this? He was only at the peak of the 5th decay, and he could kill a divine transformation realm cultivator like he was cutting vegetables. Was he kidding her? Zhuowen, you must be joking, right? Fan Shuang laughed dryly. Zhuowen shook his head and said, This is true. The reason why I am so powerful is because my soul is much stronger than my cultivation. It is even stronger than a divine transformation realm cultivator. That is why I have the strength to kill a divine transformation realm cultivator. Zhuowen then said seriously, Lady Fan Shuang, the reason why I mention my cultivation is because I have a request. Fan Shuang's face also became serious. She could feel that Zhuowen didn't seem to be lying. If Zhuowen was really only at the peak of the 5th decay, then this person was really too monstrous. Furthermore, this person was from the lower world. Fan Shuang's heart instantly burned with passion. She knew that the Clear Heart Society could definitely rope in such a monstrous person. With an expert like Zhuowen joining them, the Clear Heart Society would probably surpass the Yunjin Lord's residence in one fell swoop. In 100 outer domains, the strong were respected. No matter which faction it was, the strong were the resources that they lacked the most. A true powerhouse was enough to lead his faction to prosperity. Zhuowen, ask away. As long as I know, I will spare no effort to help you. Fan Shuang's beautiful eyes shone brightly. Zhuowen was silent for a moment before he said, I can actually break the heavens at any time. However, the only thing that I am afraid of is the heaven-breaking calamity. I would like to ask Lady Fan Shuang about something that can weaken the heaven-breaking calamity. Fan Shuang was stunned. Then, she smiled and said, This is a small matter. There are many things that can weaken the heaven-breaking calamity. Our Clear Heart Society's business department does business. We even have some secret techniques in this area. When we return to the Clear Heart Society in Yunjin Lord City, I will help you apply for these things to help you pass through the heaven-breaking calamity. Zhuowen was overjoyed and hurriedly thanked her. Other than that, I have another thing to ask. Zhuowen continued. Ask away. As long as I know, I will answer you. Fan Shuang said with a smile. Which realm do we belong to? Zhuowen asked in a low voice. Fan Shuang was stunned. She finally believed that Zhuowen was a newcomer who had just come up from the lower world. In Yunjin Lord's territory, it was impossible for any heaven-breaking expert not to know such common knowledge. We are in the Hushu realm of the 100 outer domains. Yunjin Lord's territory is only a very small area in the Hushu realm. It is almost insignificant. Fan Shuang said, The Hushu realm? Zhuowen frowned slightly. He was not unfamiliar with the Hushu realm. Su Yuan had come from the Hushu realm to search for the primordial providence in the galaxy. At that time, he, Dongwang Tai, and Su Yuan had worked together to search for the primordial providence in the place where Pangu had fallen. However, he had been tricked by Su Yuan. 1/3 of the primordial providence had been stolen by the guy behind Su Yuan, Luke. Zhuowen had learned from Su Yuan that Luke's status in the Hushu realm was not ordinary. Lady Fan Shuang, do you know Luke? Zhuowen asked casually. Chapter 3709. When Fan Shuang heard that Zhuowen didn't know Luke, she heaved a sigh of relief and fell silent. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. Based on Fan Shuang's performance, Luke was extremely famous in the Hushu realm. Back then, Zhuowen hadn't fought Luke head-on, but he knew that Luke wasn't an ordinary cultivator. His strength was also far above his own. Miss Fan Shuang, can you tell me who Luke is? Zhuan probed. Fan Shuang sighed softly. Her eyes were filled with respect as she said, Luke is the pride of Huxley. He is one of the 3 most outstanding geniuses of the younger generation in Huxley. In the future, Master Luke has the potential to become the clan leader of Huxley. In the Huxley realm, he is the idol of all the younger generation. Zhuan muttered softly, Huxley? He wasn't an ignorant person. He had learned a lot about the 100 domains from Duan Jiping. There were a total of 108 domains in the 100 domains. Each domain was controlled by a corresponding clan. The clan in the Huxley realm was Huxley. It could be said that it was the largest force in the Huxley realm. It had the highest authority and power to rule the entire Huxley realm. Luke was one of the 3 most outstanding geniuses of the younger generation in Huxley. Obviously, he wasn't a simple person. Of course, Zhuan also knew from Duan Jiping that Huxley was ranked relatively low among the 108 domains in the 100 domains. Their overall strength was relatively weak. Even so, Huxley was still a colossus to him. Zhuan didn't enter the 100 domains to cause trouble. He wanted to become stronger as soon as possible and find Moyan Wushang. Speaking of which, the 100 outer realms were so vast. If he wanted to search for a single person in such a vast territory, it would be no different from searching for a needle in a haystack. Moreover, he didn't have any clues. Unless Zhuan quickly became stronger and gained a foothold in the 100 territories. If he had the support of a powerful force behind him, he would be able to use that force's information network to find Moyan Wushang. Zhuan knew that such a force had to be at least as strong as a clan. As for the clan, there was no need to even think about it. It was impossible for outsiders to enter the clan. Every clan had a corresponding bloodline. This bloodline was unique to the clan. Only those with the same bloodline would be accepted by the clan. As for the others, even if they were accepted, they would not be able to enter the core of the clan. Young Master Luke is the true prodigy of the heavens. In the future, he will definitely shine in the Great Realm War. Fan Shuang's beautiful eyes shone brightly as she spoke in an infatuated manner. Zhuan was speechless. However, he was extremely wary of the Great Realm War that Fan Shuang had mentioned. He had already heard from Duan Jiping that the Great Realm War was a rule of the 100 territories. Every once in a while, an unprecedented war would take place. The various clans claimed that this war was just to train the cultivators in the Great Realm. In reality, even mortals had to participate. Furthermore, there were many mortals. However, Zhuan knew that the Great Realm War was just a cover. The real purpose was actually a blood sacrifice. However, every time a Great Realm War took place, every clan would give out extremely generous rewards. Regardless of whether they were cultivators or mortals, they would all receive great rewards. Although the Great Realm War was very tragic, the mortals actively participated. This was because those mortals knew that they, who had no aptitude, had to participate in the Great Realm War if they wanted to stand out. Otherwise, they would only be at the bottom of the hierarchy and become existences that could be exploited. Miss Fan Shuang, how much time is left until the Great Realm War in the Hushu realm? Zhuan asked in a deep voice. Fan Shuang's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly as she replied in a deep voice. The Great Realm War in the Hushu realm is held once every 15 years. 10 years have passed since the last Great Realm War. There are still 5 years left. Moreover, I know that the opponent of the Hushu realm this time will be the Dark Fog realm. This Great Realm War will be very disadvantageous for the Hushu realm. Zhuan was surprised and said, Is the Dark Fog realm very strong? Fan Shuang nodded and said, The Dark Fog realm's overall strength is indeed much stronger than our Hushu realm. In this battle, our Hushu realm will be at a disadvantage. Zhuan nodded and did not say anything. In his opinion, the Great Realm War had little to do with him. Even if a Great Realm War really happened, he would not choose to participate. 3 days later, the divine ship of the caravan successfully arrived outside Yunjin City. On the way back, Fan Shuang did not follow the predetermined route back. Instead, she took a detour. They knew very well that the Yunjin Lord's mansion would definitely not let this matter rest. They would definitely send more people after them. If they went back the way they came, they would undoubtedly be courting death. Although the detour took a lot of time, they finally arrived at Yunjin City safely. When their divine ship landed outside the city gate, they were immediately surrounded by a team of law enforcers. The leader was a middle-aged man in a purple robe. The man in the purple robe was tall and had a threatening aura. Yu Tianxiang. Fan Shuang's beautiful eyes narrowed. The moment she saw the man in the purple robe, she secretly sent a message to the leader of the Clear Heart Society. She knew that since Yu Tianxiang had come out, this matter would be troublesome. Although Fan Shuang was anxious in his heart, he appeared calm on the surface. He let a group of people down from the carriage and smiled at the purple-robed man. Fan Shuang from the Ming Xian Association's business department greets Grand Lord Yu. I wonder why Grand Lord Yu has gathered such a large group of people here. Zhuowen stood behind Fan Shuang and looked at Yu Tianxiang. He had already known from Fan Shuang that Yu Tianxiang was the lord of Yunjin City. He could be considered the most powerful person in Yunjin City. Miss Fan Shuang, your caravan came from the direction of Sangyan Forest, right? Yu Tianxiang glanced at Fan Shuang's team. His eyes were filled with doubt. He did not see Chan Liang Di in the team led by Fan Shuang. At the same time, he did not see a single feudal god transformation realm elite. They were basically half a step to the Heaven Breaker realm cultivators. How could such a motley crew kill Chun Liang, Song Hong Yu, and the other 3 feudal god transformation realm elites? Fan Shuang nodded and did not intend to deny it. As long as they investigated the movements of their caravan, it would be easy to find out. There was no need to hide it. Then I will have to search your divine ship carefully, Yu Tianxiang said coldly. Chapter 37:10. Yu Tianxiang sneered. My daughter, Yu Fu, and my nephew, Eugene, went to Sangyan Forest some time ago. However, not long after, their lifelines were shattered. They must have died. And you all came from the Ash Cloud Forest. Do you think I should search you or not? If you don't cooperate, it means you are guilty and I will arrest you immediately. Fan Shuang looked surprised. She did not expect Yu Fu and Eugene, the 2 direct descendants of Yunjin Lord Mansion, to go to Sangyan Forest and be killed. Who was the one who did this? Fan Shuang was hesitant. The goods they were transporting this time were of great importance, and they could not afford any mishaps. If Yu Tianxiang did something to their goods when he searched the divine ship, they would suffer a great loss and be held responsible. Feudal Lord Yu, you're so mighty. You did not provide any evidence, and you want to search our Clear Heart Society's goods. Aren't you overstepping your boundaries? An indifferent voice suddenly came from within the city gate. A slightly plump middle-aged man walked in with a group of people. Our president is here. When Fan Shuang and Lin Hu saw the chubby middle-aged man, they heaved a sigh of relief. If there was anyone in Yunjin territory who could go against Yu Tianxiang, it would be the president of the Clear Heart Society, Lu Yichuan. Yu Tianxiang looked at Lu Yichuan coldly and said, Lu Yichuan, is the Clear Heart Society guilty? You don't even dare to search the divine ship. I suspect that my daughter and nephew were secretly killed by the Clear Heart Society in Sangyan Forest. Lu Yichuan sneered. Lord Yu, I have said that you need evidence for everything. You didn't take out any evidence, and you want to search my Clear Heart Society's divine ship. Do you really think that my Clear Heart Society is a pushover? Yu Tianxiang took a step forward, and a terrifying aura exploded. Lu Yichuan was not to be outdone. He also took a step forward, and his aura was no weaker than Yu Tianxiang's. The 2 auras collided and formed a terrifying storm that swept out. The cultivators who were nearby were sent flying. Zhuowen and Fan Shuang both retreated dozens of steps, silently looking at the 2 people who were facing each other. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, the auras of the 2 of them exploded. Then, the 2 of them let out a muffled groan and retreated dozens of steps. Lu Yichuan, do you really intend to go against me? Yu Tianxiang said coldly. Lord Yu, you're very funny. Okay? I'm not going against you. You're the one who's looking for trouble with me. I had no choice but to retaliate. Also, overlord you in 3 days. Perhaps you should call me overlord. Louis Chuan said faintly. The killing intent in Yu Tianxiang's eyes burst out without any concealment. Louis Chuan, how dare you? In 3 days, during the feudal lord selection, feel free to challenge me. I will trample you under my feet. After Yu Tianxiang finished speaking, he led the law enforcement team back to the main city. Miss Fan Shuang, what is the overlord selection? Wasn't Yu Tianxiang the lord now? Why is there a need for selection? Zhuowen asked in confusion. Fan Shuang knew that Zhuowen was a newbie, so she did not show any surprise. Instead, she patiently explained it to Zhuowen. After Fan Shuang's explanation, Zhuowen finally understood what the overlord selection meant. It turned out that in the 100 territories outside the realm, all living things worship power. As long as you had great power, you would be able to obtain absolute respect. In the Hushi region, other than Huxley, any high position was determined by power. For example, the position of Yunjin Hill's overlord was chosen once every 5 years. Every time, the overlord selection had to be held. Any powerful cultivator could choose to challenge the overlord on the day of the overlord selection. As long as they successfully defeated the overlord, that person would be the next overlord. It could be said that in the 100 territories outside the realm, there were no rules or restrictions. Only power was king. In 3 days, Yu Tianxiang had been the overlord for 5 years. According to the rules, a new selection had to be held. The person in charge of the overlord selection was someone sent by the governor of Ji province. It could be said that this was a world where the strong ruled. As long as you were strong enough, you would be able to obtain anything you wanted. Fan Shuang, you did well this time. Even though Chen Liang was a spy, you still managed to deliver the goods safely. Louis Chuan walked in front of Fan Shuang and patted her shoulder. However, his gaze fell on Zhuowen, who was beside Fan Shuang. Fan Shuang naturally spoke humbly. She pointed at Zhuowen and said, President Liu, his name is Zhuowen. The reason why we were able to return safely was all thanks to him. Ha! When Fan Shuang sent me a message previously, she mentioned you. Brother Zhua, you were able to easily defeat Chen Liang, Song Hong Yu, and the other 3. This is enough to prove that your strength has reached the spirit transformation initial stage. If Brother Zhua doesn't mind, the position of Vice President of the Clear Heart Society is still vacant. I wonder if Brother Zhua is interested. Louis Chuan said with a smile. Fan Shuang, Lin Hu, and the others were shocked. They did not expect Louis Chuan to value Zhuowen so much. They had only met for the first time, and he had already planned to give the position of vice president to Zhuowen. Zhuowen pondered for a moment. He had just arrived at the 100 regions and had no one to rely on. He did not even know much about the 100 regions. Now that the president of the Clear Heart Society, Lu Yichuan, had sincerely invited him, Zhuowen was indeed moved. President Liu, I will definitely not be able to stay in Yunjin territory for too long. This is because I have my own matters to attend to. If I were to become the vice president and have to leave Yunjin territory one day, wouldn't that be bad? Zhuowen said helplessly. Lu Yichuan laughed and said, Brother Zhua, you don't have to worry. If you really want to leave Yunjin territory in the future, our Clear Heart Society will not force you to stay. You are free to do whatever you want in the Clear Heart Society. However, as long as Brother Zhua is in the Clear Heart Society, you still need to contribute to our Clear Heart Society. I only have this one request. As long as Brother Zhua agrees, the vice president of the Clear Heart Society will be yours. Zhuowen clasped his fists and said, President Liu is benevolent and righteous. If so, I will not decline. Ha! With Brother Zhua joining our Clear Heart Society, our Clear Heart Society will have a bright future. Lu Yichuan laughed. Fan Shuang's beautiful eyes looked at Zhuowen's back as Lu Yichuan warmly welcomed him into the city. She said with some hidden bitterness, It seems that the death of Green Elephant Village Chief Nan Qingxiang that night was also caused by him. I really did not expect that a cultivator who just came up from the lower realm would have such strength. This is the first time I have seen it. Lin, who stood beside Fan Shuang, and said with emotion, Miss Fan Shuang, perhaps this is a genius. However, I don't understand why President Liu did not even investigate and directly appointed this person as the vice president. This is too hasty. Chapter 37:11. The Clearheart Society was indeed the second most powerful faction in the Yunjin region. In the Yunjin region, they controlled many resources and various industries. After Liu Yichuan brought Zhuowen back to the headquarters, he immediately announced to the Hall Masters that Zhuowen was the new vice president of the Clearheart Society. Everyone in the Clearheart Society was shocked. There were even many voices of opposition. At that moment, Liu Yichuan was sitting steadily on the main seat in the Clearheart Society's main hall. Zhuowen sat beside Liu Yichuan with a calm gaze. Apart from that, there were dozens of seats in the main hall that were all filled with people. Those sitting in the main hall were the hall masters of the Clearheart Society's various halls. After knowing that the Clearheart Society had a new vice president, they couldn't sit still and rushed to the main hall. Fan Shuang stood not far from the main hall. When she saw the people around her, she felt uneasy. She even saw that her father had come. However, her father wasn't looking at her. Instead, he was staring at Zhuowen, who was beside Liu Yichuan like everyone else. It was Fan Shuang's first time seeing such a grand scene. In her memory, even when something big happened in the Clearheart Society in the past, only a portion of the Hall Masters would attend the meeting. However, this time, all of them were present. Moreover, all of them were aggressive. They didn't come with good intentions. President, you should give us an explanation. The Clearheart Society has never had a vice president. Now, not only do we have one, but we even gave the position to this piece of trash who is only at the 5th blight. President, I, Shun Wang, am the first to disagree with your decision. A middle-aged man sitting at the very front suddenly stood up. He glanced coldly at Zhuowen and imparted doubt to Liu Yi. Fan Shuang's expression changed slightly. She wasn't unfamiliar with this middle-aged man. He was the Hall Master of the Clearheart Society's Martial Arts Hall. He was also the leader of all the Hall Masters and was the second most powerful expert in the Clearheart Society. Shun Wang's prestige in the Clearheart Society was extremely high. Moreover, his strength had reached the peak of the Divine Fetus Transformation realm. In the Clearheart Society, only Liu Yichuan could suppress him. As soon as Xin Wang finished speaking, there were many people below who spoke in support of Xin Wang. Liu Yichuan's gaze was calm as he smiled faintly. Hall Master Shun, I don't blame you for not knowing the situation. I can clearly tell you that Brother Zhuo's strength is not below mine. Xin Wang was startled. Soon after, he burst into laughter and said, President, we respect and obey you because you are an expert. You are much stronger than all of us. Therefore, we are willing to work under you. But what right does this piece of trash have? His cultivation is only at the 5th blight. Even if you say that his strength is on par with yours, do you think we would believe you? Xin Wang, I will definitely not work for this piece of trash. As he spoke, Xin Wang suddenly stood up and looked provocatively at Zhuowen, who was beside Liu Yichuan. In the main hall, the other hall masters also started a jeer. Liu Yichuan glanced at Zhuowen, but did not say anything. Instead, he fell into silence. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He already understood what Liu Yichuan meant. Even though Fan Shuang had told him about his strength, and Liu Yichuan had also acted courteously and naturally, Liu Yichuan did not believe that Shun Wang's true strength was enough to kill Chun Liang, Song Hongyu, and the others. However, Liu Yichuan was too embarrassed to say it out loud. He could not say it, but his subordinates could. Shun Wang had obviously become Liu Yichuan's medium. Clearheart Society slowly stood up. He looked at Xin Wang and said, You are Xin Wang, right? You said that you only follow the strong, right? As long as I prove that I am stronger than you, you will have no objections to me being the vice president. Xin Wang grinned and said, Of course. As long as you have the strength that the president said, you should be the vice president. As long as you can defeat me, I will admit that you are the vice president. However, if you're killed by me, don't blame me for not showing mercy. Also, you should give up your vice president position to me." Lu Yichuan Heart Sect Hall Master looked on silently. He did not say anything. He also wanted to see if Zhua Heart Sect Hall Master's strength was as Fan Shuang had said, that he had the strength to kill a divine transformation stage expert. If Zhua Heart Sect Hall Master had an undeserved reputation, he would not give the vice president position to Zhua Heart Sect Hall Master. "Then make your move now," Zhua Heart Sect Hall Master said calmly. Shen Wang was stunned. He said in disbelief, "Now? Right here?" "Yes. Dealing with you is just a matter of one move. It is a waste of time to go out and fight with you," Zhua Heart Sect Hall Master said expressionlessly. The moment these words were spoken, the entire place went into an uproar. All the Hall Masters felt that Zhua Wen was crazy to actually speak such nonsense. Lu Yichuan Heart Sect Hall Master also looked at Zhua Wen. He could not tell if Zhua Wen was just putting on an act or if he really had the ability. Shen Wang's expression turned ugly. A fifth blight, Trash, actually dared to say that he could defeat him in one move. That was a little too arrogant. "Since you want to die, then fine. All right, I'll fulfill your wish right now." As he spoke, Shen Wang walked towards Zhua Wen step by step. His aura continued to climb as he walked. A terrifying aura swept out, creating a strong pressure in the main hall. The pressure was too terrifying. Many of the hall masters who were sitting in their seats, stood up, and began to distance themselves from Shen Wang to avoid being injured. Lu Yichuan Heart Sect Hall Master sat silently on the main seat. He watched Shen Wang walk toward Zhua Wen without any intention of stopping him. Bang! Suddenly, Shen Wang stomped his right foot and his speed increased. A terrifying aura burst out, and he appeared in front of Zhua Wen in an instant. He clenched his right hand into a fist and punched fiercely at Zhua Wen's face. Zhua Wen stood calmly on the spot and also punched out. Compared to Shen Wang's vigorous fist aura, Zhua Wen's fist aura was too plain, without any ripples. However, what everyone did not know was that Zhua Wen's fist had fused a portion of his soul sword intent. Bang! When the two fists collided, a terrifying air wave overflowed and spread out like layers of waves. It was extremely terrifying. Then, Shen Wang's expression changed drastically. His eyes were filled with fear. He only felt that the terrifying power coming from the right fist seemed to have completely crushed him. Moreover, he also felt a sharp sword intent in the power. His body was covered in wounds from his sword intent. Puffed. Shen Wang spat out a mouthful of blood. His right fist was directly bent, and he flew backward, landing heavily outside the main hall's entrance. By the time everyone reacted, Shen Wang's clothes had been torn into many holes. From the traces of the holes, it was obvious that they were cut by some kind of sharp divine sword. Chapter 37:12. Zhua Wen patted his right sleeve with his left hand and returned to his seat. He said indifferently, "Does anyone have any objections to me being the vice president? If there is, then come up. I, Zhua Wen, will accept your challenge." Hearing this, everyone's face twitched. If they hadn't seen Shen Wang's fate, they would have been eager to try and raise their objections. But now, after seeing Shen Wang fainted from a single blow, they still dared to provoke Zhua Wen. Wasn't that just looking for trouble? As expected of the vice president chosen by the president. Vice President Zhua is indeed powerful. He is qualified to be our vice president. If anyone doesn't agree, I, Chen Rong, will be the first to teach them a lesson. Zhua Wen sat in his seat and silently watched the hall masters scramble to defend themselves. A sneer appeared on his face. All right, everyone quiet down. I believe everyone has already seen Vice President Zhua's strength. Everyone should have no objections, right? At this moment, Lu Yichuan, who had been silent, finally spoke. With a smile on his face, he looked at Zhua Wen with an extremely satisfied gaze. Chen Rong, take Shen Wang away and take good care of him, Lu Yichuan said indifferently. Below, a thin and tall man stood up, and cupped his hands towards Louis Chuan. Then, he bowed towards Zhuowen before retreating and carrying the unconscious Shun Wang away. After Zhuowen sat down, he didn't say a word. Of course, even if he didn't say anything, everyone looked at him with even more respect. In the 100 outer regions, the strong would always be above others. If you were strong enough, you would receive enough respect and reverence. On the other hand, the weak would be constantly bullied and trampled on by others. They would not have any dignity at all. Moreover, Zhuowen knew that the reason why Lu Yichuan didn't stop Shen Wang was because he doubted his strength. Therefore, he wanted to see how strong Zhuowen was under Shen Wang's provocation. Lu Yichuan was very satisfied with the result. Zhuowen's strength had exceeded his expectations. From Zhuowen's performance just now, Lu Yichuan was certain that Zhuowen was at least at the initial stage of the spirit transformation realm. He might even be at the intermediate stage. Although there was still a gap between their cultivations, for such an expert to join their Clear Heart Society, it was definitely their Clear Heart Society picking up shit. Moreover, Lu Yichuan also discovered that Zhuowen's bone age was not very high. Clearly, this person had a lot of room for development and was a rare talent. Vice President Zhuo has just joined our Clear Heart Society, so he doesn't know much about our Clear Heart Society. He needs someone to help him understand the Clear Heart Society. Who is willing? Lu Yichuan asked with a smile. Within the main hall, many hall masters were scrambling to express their willingness to serve Zhuowen. They all wanted to get close to Zhuowen, the vice president, so that they could have a better future in the Clear Heart Society. Zhuowen's gaze landed on Fan Shuang, who was standing in the corner. He said indifferently, "I am more familiar with Miss Fan Shuang. Let Miss Fan Shuang lead me to understand the Clear Heart Society." As soon as he said that, the originally enthusiastic hall masters did not dare to say anything. Fan Shuang was also a little surprised. She looked at Zhuowen with a complicated gaze and stuttered. Haha, since the vice president has personally requested for you to be the guide, then you can be the guide. Fan Shuang, you must perform well in front of the vice president. Lu Yichuan said with deep meaning. Fan Shuang's face was a little hot. She softly replied and obediently walked to Zhuowen's side. However, Fan Shuang still felt that it was unrealistic. Zhuowen's status had risen a little too quickly. A few days ago, Zhuowen was only an ordinary guard in their group, but now he had become the vice president of the Clear Heart Society. His position was only below Lu Yichuan. This huge contrast made Fan Shuang feel as if the world was spinning around her. Her head was spinning, and she did not know what to do. After that, Lu Yichuan spoke for a while and dismissed the meeting. Before the hall masters left, they bowed to Lu Yichuan and Zhuowen from afar. They had already acknowledged Zhuowen's strength. Therefore, they treated Zhuowen with the same attitude as the vice president. Brother Zhuo, it will be the day of the Lord's selection in a few days' time. I will hand over all the matters of the Clear Heart Society to you. Lu Yichuan smiled and looked at Zhuowen. Zhuowen nodded and said, President Lu, go ahead and cultivate in seclusion. I will take care of the matters of the Clear Heart Society. Lu Yichuan nodded satisfactorily and handed a token to Zhuowen. He said, This token is the identity token of the Gujian Villa's Villa Master. In the future, the Gujian Villa will be Brother Zhuo's residence. After that, Lu Yichuan left the main hall. It is the Gujian Villa's token. Fan Shuang was a little surprised. Miss Fan Shuang, is there something wrong? Zhuowen asked curiously. Fan Shuang's beautiful eyes twinkled as she said, The Gujian Villa is the most luxurious residence in the Clear Heart Society. It is even bigger than President Lu's residence. However, the Ancient Sword Villa has a group of 10 extremely arrogant guards, and every single one of them has the strength of the fetal god transformation stage. These 10 guards are known as the 10 Sword Guards. They only listen to the orders of the previous Villa Master. The other Villa Masters who are appointed to enter Gujian Villa can only stay in the side hall if they enter Gujian Villa. The main hall is guarded by them, and no one is allowed to enter. If anyone enters the main hall without permission, the 10 Sword Guards will attack and kill the intruder. At this point, Fan Shuang smiled bitterly. Although the Gujin Villa occupies the largest area in the Ming Xian faction, other than the first Villa Master, the rest of the Villa Masters can only stay in the cramped side palace. They have the worst living conditions. I don't understand. Why did President Liu arrange for you to stay in the Gujin Villa? Zhuowen smiled and said, that is because President Liu thinks that I have the ability to control the Gujin Villa. Didn't you say that the 10 sword guards only listen to the orders of the first Villa Master? May I know where the first Villa Master is now? Zhuowen suddenly asked. Fan Shuang smiled bitterly and said, the first Villa Master was also at the spear transformation stage. He was competing with the current Villa Master for the position of Villa Master. In the end, he died. Since then, the Gujin Villa has never acknowledged anyone else as its Villa Master. Zhuowen nodded and walked out of the main hall. He still needed Fan Shuang to explain the structure and power of the Clear Heart Society to him. After all, he was a newbie. He couldn't possibly be ignorant. When they walked out of the main hall, Zhuowen saw a man in his 50s. He was wearing luxurious clothes and standing not far away. He seemed to be waiting for something. When the middle-aged man saw Zhuowen and Fan Shuang coming out, he quickly walked forward and said enthusiastically, I am Fan Yong, the Minister of Commerce of the Clear Heart Society. Greetings to the Vice President. The Minister of Commerce? Zhuowen looked at Fan Shuang, who was beside him. He remembered that Fan Shuang was also from the Minister of Commerce. Moreover, her surname was Fan. It seemed like the two of them were related. Master Zhua, he is my father. He is from the Clear Heart Society's Minister of Commerce. It is a special organization of the Clear Heart Society that specializes in managing finances, Fan Shuang said indifferently. Chapter 37:13. The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curled up into a smile, and he took the spirit ring without hesitation. He knew what Fan Yong was thinking. Giving him the boundary stone was just an excuse to win him over. Vice President, the Gujin Villa is not a good place. The Commerce Department has a luxurious mansion that is still empty. If you don't mind, you can move it to the Commerce Department. Fan Yong said politely. Fan Shuang frowned and said unhappily, Father, the Gujin Villa was given to Master Zhua by President Liu himself. This mansion cannot be changed just because of you. Fan Yong said calmly, Fan Shuang, we're talking. Why are you interrupting? Did I ask you to interrupt? Moreover, the right to change the mansion is in the hands of the Vice President. As long as the Vice President sends a message to the President, the mansion will be changed. Fan Shuang's face changed, and her eyes were filled with coldness. However, she did not refute Fan Yong. Since President Liu has given the Gujin Villa to me, he must have his reasons. There is no need to change the mansion. Minister Fan's kindness, this Zhuo appreciates it. If there's nothing else, Minister Fan, please return. Zhuowen said coolly. Fan Yong's face changed. He nodded and slowly left. Fan Shuang then brought Zhuowen to visit the various branches of the Clear Heart Society. She also explained to him the power structure of the Clear Heart Society and things to take note of. After Zhuowen understood everything, the two of them walked toward the Gujin Villa. What surprised Zhuowen was that the Gujin Villa was located in an extremely remote area in the northwest corner of Yanjin City. This place was the most desolate area in the city. There were no houses within a few hundred meters of it. Most of it was barren land. The Gujin Villa was located on a tall mountain in this barren land. Zhuowen was quite satisfied with the Gujin Villa. It was quiet and far away from the core of the Clear Heart Society. Naturally, he could cultivate in peace, and his secrets would not be discovered by others. Lady Fan Shuang, from today onwards, you will temporarily manage the affairs of the Vice President on my behalf. I will give you the corresponding authority of the Vice President. Zhuowen said to Fan Shuang at the foot of the mountain. Fan Shuang opened her mouth in disbelief. Master Zhuo, what did you say? You want to give me the authority of a Vice President? I might not be up to the task. Zhuowen shook his head and said, I'm infatuated with cultivation and am not interested in trivial matters. Also, the reason why I joined the Clear Heart Society is not to help with the society's affairs, but to have a place to stay. Furthermore, I've seen your methods. Your ability to handle matters is much better than mine. Don't worry, if you handle it well, I will naturally reward you. I just don't know if you're willing." Fan Shuang's face flushed red as she hurriedly said, "I'm willing." It's Fan Shuang's honor to be of service to Lord Zhuo. Zhuo nodded and led Fan Shuang to the top of the mountain. When Zhuo stopped at the entrance of the Gujin villa, he looked at the majestic manor in front of him and revealed a look of amazement. "Are you the new manor lord?" A figure leaned against a pillar in front of the manor. It was a man in blue with a divine sword on his back. He stared coldly at Zhuo, his expression full of provocation and disdain. "Fifth decay. Too weak. You're really too weak. Is Lu Yichuan out of his mind? He actually let a piece of trash like you be the manor lord of the Gujian villa." The man in blue said coldly. "You're one of the 10 swordsmen?" Fan Shuang asked seriously. "I'm the 10th sword of the 10 swordsmen. You can call me 10th sword. I received news from Lu Yichuan that there would be a new manor lord, so I was waiting at the entrance. I wanted to see what kind of powerful person the manor lord was, but I didn't expect him to be a piece of trash. I'm so disappointed. If it weren't for Lu Yichuan's repeated reminders, I would have killed you right now. Unfortunately, I'll let you live for a while. The two of you can scram to the thatched hut at the side." Then, 10th Sword casually pointed at a shabby thatched hut a few dozen meters to the left of the entrance. 10th Sword, aren't you going overboard? In the past, the manor lord of the Gujin villa would at least have a side palace to stay in. Why are we only staying in the thatched hut this time? Fan Shuang said angrily. 10th Sword laughed and said, "A person will naturally live in a house like that. A piece of trash at the 5th decay wants to stay in the side palace? Are you kidding me?" Fan Shuang's eyes were filled with anger. She wanted to say something, but Zhuowen stopped her. "I want to stay in the main palace," Zhuowen said calmly. 10th Sword, who was about to go back, suddenly froze. He turned around and stared at Zhuowen with narrowed eyes. "What did you just say? Do you dare to say it again?" 10th Sword's eyes became extremely unfriendly. There was even a hint of killing intent in the depths of his eyes. Fan Shuang's face changed slightly. She knew something was wrong. The main palace had always been guarded by the 10 swordsmen. The words main palace were taboo to them. Whoever said anything would be hunted down by the 10 swordsmen. "I said, I want to stay in the main palace. Only the main palace is barely worthy for me to stay in," Zhuowen repeated calmly. 10th Sword laughed, but the killing intent on his body surged out like a storm. He was like a killing machine. Fan Shuang trembled. 10th Sword's killing intent was too terrifying. She almost couldn't take it anymore and knelt down. "Ha! You are the most arrogant and the weakest among all the manor lords of the Gujian villa. You have blasphemed the Gujian villa, so I don't need to care about Lu Yichuan's instructions. I will kill you directly." With that, 10th Sword stomped his right foot and disappeared on the spot. When he appeared again, he was already behind Zhuowen. He had already pulled out the divine sword on his back and stabbed it at the back of Zhuowen's head. 10th Sword's cultivation was not bad. It was around the early stage of the embryonic god transformation realm. However, in Zhuowen's eyes, it was nothing. Zhuowen took a step forward, and purple snow filled the air around him. His figure disappeared on the spot like a ghost, dodging 10 Sword's attack. Then he punched out. Under 10th Sword's incredulous gaze, his fist sank into his chest. "Pucci!" 10th Sword spat out a mouthful of blood. The divine sword in his hand flew out, and he fell in front of the door of the villa. "You don't need to hide in the dark. Come out. Today, I will stay in the main palace of the Gujin villa. None of you can stop me." Zhuowen walked slowly toward the door of the Gujin villa. Whoosh! Whoosh! Chapter 37:14. The middle-aged man helped 10 Swords up and cupped his fists at Zhuowen. "You must be the new villa master. Your strength has been acknowledged by us. You can stay in the side palace now." Just now, 10 Sword was a little rude. "Here, First Sword apologizes to you." Zhuowen's gaze turned even colder. My patience is limited. I have said that I want to stay in the main palace. Since I am the villa master of Gujian Villa, everyone in the villa must submit to me. The 10 sword guards are no exception. 10 swords face darkened. Villa master, aren't you making things difficult for us? The rules of Gujian Villa have always been like this. Only the first villa master has the right to stay in the main palace. As for the others, they have no right at all. Bang! Just as 10 swords finished speaking, a purple blade came from behind 10 swords and chopped off his right arm that was holding the sword. 10 swords groaned. Before he could react, his chest was stepped on by a foot. He could not help but fall to the ground. 10 swords looked at Zhuowen in horror. He did not see clearly when this person attacked. Now, I am the villa master of Gujian Villa. All the rules are decided by me. If you don't agree, I will beat you until you do. As Zhuowen spoke, he lifted 10 swords guards and swung it at the other 10 swords guards who were pouncing on him. After that, Zhuowen used his purple snow movement technique and shuttled through the endless purple snow. Every time he shuttled through the snow, he would knock down a 10 swords guard with a punch. In a short while, the 10 swords guards were all beaten down. Fan Shuang was not too surprised when she saw this scene. The 10 swords guards were indeed strong. However, she had seen Zhuowen's stronger moves. If someone said that Zhuowen was not a match for the 10 swords guards, she would not believe it. Fan Shuang, let's go, Zhuowen said, and pushed open the door of the Gujian Villa with large strides. He entered the main hall with a composed expression. The 10 swords guards struggled to stand up. They looked at Zhuowen and Fan Shuang's backs with a complicated expression. Big brother, are we just going to let them in? That's where the first manor master lived. 10 swords said with a cold gaze as he struggled to support his body. This person's strength is not any weaker than the first manor master. He might even be stronger than the first manor master. One sword said in a deep voice. How is that possible? The first manor lord was even stronger than Lu Yichuan back then. If he hadn't been seriously injured and forced to participate in the lord selection, I'm afraid that the first manor lord would have already become Yunjin Lord. Have you all forgotten the rules left behind by the first manor lord? He said that as long as there is someone who can defeat the 10 of us sword guards in the future, that person will be the new manor lord. With such strength, it's reasonable for him to become the true master of Gujian Villa. One sword said solemnly. The others remained silent. What Yi Jian said was right. This was indeed the first manor lord's final wish. Go. We will kneel outside the main hall and beg for the manor lord forgiveness. One sword stood up with great difficulty and led the 10 sword guards towards the main palace. Night fell. At the center of Gujian Villa stood a huge stone sword statue. It emitted a gentle light that dispelled the evil aura around it. Zhuowen sat in the main palace while Fan Shuang stood not far away. Master Zhua, the 10 sword guards have been kneeling outside for 12 hours. Fan Shuang said softly. Zhuowen nodded, indicating that he understood. Fan Shuang, during this period of time, help me gather as many items that can weaken the great heaven-crushing calamity as possible. Zhuowen said in a deep voice. He could break through at any time now. However, he had been suppressing it because he was afraid of the great heaven-crushing calamity. Now that he was the vice president of the Clear Heart Society, he could use the Clear Heart Society's power to gather as many items as possible. Don't worry, Master. I'll be keeping an eye on this for a long time. In less than 10 days, I'll be able to gather all the items and send them to you. Fan Shuang said with a smile. Thank you for your hard work. Also, can you use the Clear Heart Society's power to find a higher level visualization diagram? At the very least, you'll be able to cultivate to the 5th transformation. Zhuowen continued. Fan Shuang smiled bitterly and said, Master, there are almost no high-level visualization diagrams in Yunjin Hill. In Yunjin Hill, the highest level visualization diagram that appeared could only be cultivated to the 5th transformation. If you want to get a visualization diagram of this level, you'll have to go to the governor of Ji province to try your luck. Yunjin Hill definitely doesn't have it. Zhuowen frowned and thought for a moment. Then, he waved his hand and asked Fan Shuang to leave. It seemed like Yunjin Hill was still too small. They didn't even have a high-level visualization diagram. Zhuowen only had the green lotus visualization diagram. However, he had already cultivated this visualization diagram to the peak. His soul had also reached the peak of the third transformation. However, if he wanted to improve his soul, he would need a visualization diagram of a higher level. Zhuowen stood up and pushed the door open. The 10 sword guards were kneeling in the courtyard outside the door. When they heard the door being pushed open, they raised their heads and looked at Zhuowen in awe. From today onwards, I'm the Manor Lord of Gujian Villa. Are you convinced now? Zhuowen said calmly. Yes. From now on, Master Zhua is our Manor Lord. We're willing to serve Master Zhua. The 10 sword guards answered loudly. In the future, you'll realize how wise your decision to submit to me today was. Take this bottle of healing pills. Zhuowen threw a jade bottle to the 10 sword guards and asked them to leave. 2 days later, Fan Shuang knocked on Zhuowen's door. I've prepared everything for the heavenly tribulation. When Zhuowen saw Fan Shuang walking in, he slowly stood up and said. Fan Shuang shook her head awkwardly and said, Master Zhu, the heavenly tribulation will take some time. The reason I'm here today is because of the Lord's selection. Today, Yu Tianxiang will accept the challenge of all the cultivators in Yunjin Hill. The president of the Clear Heart Society, Lu Yichuan, will challenge Yu Tianxiang to become the Lord of Yunjin Hill. Master Zhua, you're the vice president of the Clear Heart Society. You should show up for such a grand event. Zhuowen said disinterestedly. I thought it was something serious. I won't show up for this kind of thing. You can represent me. Also, let the sword guards accompany you to ensure your safety. Also, hurry up and collect the items for the heavenly tribulation. My heavenly tribulation is coming soon. I can't delay it any longer. After saying that, Zhuowen closed the door. Fan Shuang smiled bitterly as she looked at the door that had been shut. Ever since Zhuowen entered the Gujian Villa, he had become a completely hands-off boss. Miss Fan Shuang, the Manor Lord has ordered me to attend the Lord's selection with you. The sword guards appeared behind Fan Shuang silently. Let's go. Fan Shuang regained her composure and left the Gujian Villa with the sword guards. In the Clear Heart Society, Lu Yichuan slowly walked out of the seclusion area with the crowd surrounding him. When Lu Yichuan appeared, the members of the Clear Heart Society cheered and shouted that their president would definitely win. Lu Yichuan smiled faintly. He looked in the direction of the Yunjin Hill Lord's mansion, and his eyes flashed coldly. Fan Shuang, where's Master Zhua? When Fan Yong saw Fan Shuang and the sword guards walking over, he quickly went up to ask about Zhuowen's whereabouts. Fan Shuang shook her head and said, Master Zhua is in seclusion. Therefore, he asked me to represent him in the Lord's selection. What? The Lord's selection is a grand event. Master Zhua is not even here. Isn't this too childish? Fan Yong frowned and said. The moment Fan Yong said that, the sword guards pulled out the divine sword and pointed it at Fan Yong's neck. How dare you disrespect the Manor Lord? Do you think I won't kill you? Chapter 37:15. Lu Yichuan also noticed Fan Shuang and Yi Jian. He looked at Yi Jian and asked, Fan Shuang, where's Brother Zhua? Why don't I see him? Fan Shuang said respectfully, President, Master Zhua is in seclusion, so it's not convenient for him. He asked me and Yi Jian to represent Gujian Manor. Lu Yichuan frowned, but quickly regained his composure. He looked at Yi Jian and said, Yi Jian, the 10 swordsmen were not so obedient in the past. Why did you come with Fan Shuang? Yi Jian said seriously, This is the Manor Master's order. As the 10 swordsmen of Gujian Manor, the Manor Master's order is everything. As soon as he said this, Lu Yichuan and the other members of the Clear Heart Society were shocked. Everyone in the Clear Heart Society knew what the 10 swordsmen were like. The 10 swordsmen had never respected the previous Manor Master of Gujian Manor. However, the leader of the 10 swordsmen, Yi Jian, was obeying the new Manor Master. Could it be that Zhua had really subdued the 10 swordsmen? Haha, Brother Zhua has really given me quite a few surprises. Since you're here, Yi Jian, you're qualified to represent Brother Zhua. Let's go to the Yunjin Lord Mansion. Lu Yichuan laughed and walked in the direction of the Yunjin Lord Mansion, surrounded by the crowd. At that moment, the huge square in front of the Yunjin Lord Mansion was already crowded with people. In the middle of the crowd, there was a tall bluestone ring. At this moment, a middle-aged man in a purple robe stood quietly on the arena. He was the Yunjin Lord, Yu Tianxiang. In front of the ring, which was at the front of the square, was an old man with white hair and a youthful face. He was surrounded by beautiful maids who served him tea. Strangely, the gazes of everyone in the plaza were filled with reverence as they looked at the old man. Everyone knew that the old man was from the governor of Ji province. He was the examiner of the Lord's selection, and his position was higher than Yu Tianxiang's. Today is the day of another overlord selection. If any one of you is interested in the position of overlord, feel free to challenge me. As long as you defeat me, you will be the new overlord of Yunjin Hill. Yu Tianxiang's voice was not loud, but most people in the square could hear it clearly. Everyone in the square was in an uproar. Many cultivators had excited looks on their faces. However, most of them were dejected. They all knew their own limits. They knew that with their current cultivation, it was impossible for them to be Yu Tianxiang's opponent. The commotion below the stage didn't last long before a figure rushed up. He was a 2-meter-tall man with a giant axe on his back and a fierce look on his face. It's the most fearsome bandit leader in the vicinity of Yunjin Hill, Sha Yin. This guy is wanted by the Yunjin Hill Lord's Mansion. He actually came to participate in the Lord's selection. Many people below the stage were in an uproar. They all recognized this 2-meter-tall man. Sha Yin, you've got guts. You're clearly a wanted criminal, yet you actually dare to participate in the overlord selection. Are you courting death? Yu Tianxiang said coldly. Sha Yin grinned and said, Normally, I wouldn't dare to come here. However, today is the day of the overlord selection. I remember that there are no other conditions in the overlord selection. As long as your fist is strong enough, you can participate. As long as you're strong enough, you can become the overlord. Is there a problem with me participating? Yu Tianxiang frowned. Sha Yin was right. There were no such rules in the overlord selection. As long as you were strong enough, even a bandit could become the overlord. Then make your move. Otherwise, you won't have the chance to make your move later. Yu Tianxiang said indifferently. Sha Yin sneered and said, Yu Tianxiang, you're too arrogant. I've had some fortuitous encounters over the years. My cultivation has skyrocketed. I've reached the middle stage of the spirit transformation realm. You might not be my opponent. Sha Yin said as he strode towards Yu Tianxiang. He took the giant axe on his back and swung it towards Yu Tianxiang. Wherever the giant axe passed, a terrifying storm would constantly sweep up, and many of the cultivators below the stage would be blown away. In the blink of an eye, Sha Yin arrived in front of Yu Tianxiang. He held the giant axe with both hands and quickly smashed it towards Yu Tianxiang's head. Bang! The giant axe smashed into the air and landed on the edge of the stage. Instantly, the entire stage shook. But soon, the surface of the stage flashed with countless green lights. Within the green lights, there were dense patterns. The stage had been reinforced with the power of a formation. It was enough to withstand the full power of a heaven-breaking 3-transformation realm expert. At this moment, Yu Tianxiang appeared behind Sha Yin. His right hand formed a blade and slashed at Sha Yin's back. Crack! A huge bloody hole was blasted out of Sha Yin's back. Blood splashed out like crazy, and Sha Yin fell out of the ring. Sha Yin was defeated. However, Yu Tianxiang did not plan to let Sha Yin go. He jumped down from a stage and slashed at Sha Yin's body. Sha Yin tried his best to resist, but it was useless. His limbs were finally chopped off. Men, take Sha Yin away and lock him in the prison. Yu Tianxiang returned to the stage and ordered his men to drag Sha Yin away. Below the stage, the crowd was in an uproar. They looked at Yu Tianxiang with eyes full of respect. Sha Yin was a spirit transformation middle stage powerhouse, but he was defeated by Yu Tianxiang so easily. Next, some cultivators appeared below the stage to challenge Yu Tianxiang. They were all in the spirit transformation realm, but they were no match for Yu Tianxiang. Suddenly, the crowd below the stage parted to form a path. A group of people slowly walked towards the stage. It's the president of the Clear Heart Society, Lu Yichuan. In Yunjin territory, I'm afraid only Lu Yichuan can fight with Yu Tianxiang. The crowd below the stage looked at Lu Yichuan quietly. Their eyes were filled with excitement. Lu Yichuan jumped onto the stage and looked at Yu Tianxiang indifferently. The rest of the members of the Clear Heart Society were scattered around the stage. Fan Shuang and Yi Jian were mixed in the crowd and looked at the two people on the stage silently. Lord Yu, you have stayed in the Yunjin Territory Mansion for long enough. It's time for you to step down. Lu Yichuan said indifferently. Yu Tianxiang laughed and said, President Lu, you really know how to joke. In the entire Yunjin territory, who is stronger than me? If there is someone stronger, I will naturally give up my position. If there isn't, why should I give up my position to someone weaker? You will give up your position to me soon because I am stronger than you. Lu Yichuan snorted coldly. He took a step forward and attacked Yu Tianxiang. The moment Lu Yichuan attacked, he took out his natal divine weapon, the mace. Yu Tianxiang did not dare to be careless. He knew that since Lu Yichuan dared to challenge him, his cultivation must have reached the peak of the spirit transformation realm. However, there was still a difference in strength between those who were at the peak of the spirit transformation realm. Yu Tianxiang held a golden rod and swung it at Lu Yichuan. Bang! The mace and the stick collided with each other, producing a crisp sound of an explosion. Then, layers of terrifying waves spread out in all directions. Chapter 37:16. Lu Yichuan's strength isn't bad. I didn't sense the aura of a star weapon from him. It seems like the star weapon fragment isn't on him. Does that mean it's still hidden somewhere in the Clear Heart Society? If Lu Yichuan doesn't have the star weapon fragment, then he's no match for Yu Tianxiang. Di Wenxing thought to himself. The battle between Yu Tianxiang and Lu Yichuan became more and more intense. Everyone in the plaza began to retreat, not daring to approach. Fortunately, there were arrays set up around the stage. Otherwise, the ripples from the battle would have caused many casualties. Heavenly Dipper Stick. Suddenly, Yu Tianxiang leaped up, raised the golden stick above his head, and smashed it down. The power of the stick was too terrifying. Golden energy overflowed and formed a huge shadow of a giant stick in the air that smashed towards Lu Yichuan. Lu Yichuan's face changed. He realized that he had miscalculated. Although Yu Tianxiang's cultivation was similar to his, he was still stronger. His chances of winning this battle weren't high. Iron Fang Wolf Dance. Lu Yichuan was helpless and used his strongest ability. He swung his mace, and purplish-blue energy exploded, forming a huge purple wolf that pounced towards a golden stick. Boom! The shadow of the giant stick smashed onto the wolf, shattering it. Then, without losing any momentum, it landed on Lu Yichuan's body. Pucci! Lu Yichuan spat out a mouthful of blood and fell out of the stage. He clutched his chest and looked at Yu Tianxiang in disbelief. You're also at the pinnacle of the spirit transformation realm. How can you be so powerful? Lu Yichuan struggled to stand up and asked unwillingly. Yu Tianxiang didn't answer his question. Instead, he descended from the sky. The golden stick in his hand didn't slow down and continued to hit Lu Yichuan. Yu Tianxiang, I've already lost. Lu Yichuan's face changed, but the speed of the golden stick was too fast. He raised his hands to block it. Crack! His hands shattered, and he spat out a mouthful of blood as he was sent back into the stage. Who said you've lost? As long as you're still in the stage, you have to continue fighting. Yu Tianxiang's cold voice sounded. Then, his figure moved around the stage like a ghost. Every time he flashed, a shadow of the staff would appear and hit Lu Yichuan's body solidly. Moreover, Yu Tianxiang would purposely leave Lu Yichuan in the stage with each attack. Lu Yichuan was shocked and angry, but his injuries were very serious. and he could only passively resist. His body was constantly being bombarded with terrifying injuries by the golden rod. The members of the Clear Heart Society were in an uproar. "You Qinxiang, you've gone too far. Our president has already admitted defeat. Why are you still attacking him?" All the members of the Clear Heart Society protested. Some of them even rushed towards the stage to save Lu Yichuan. "Right. They. T, they. T's, a. T. Looks like the Yunjin Lord Manor wants to use this opportunity to deal with the Clear Heart Society. Miss Fan Shuang, let's go back to the Gujian Manor and report this to the Manor Lord." Yijian grabbed Fan Shuang and rushed out of the square. The 10 sword guards were only loyal to the Gujian Manor. They did not have much affection for the Clear Heart Society. Therefore, Yijian left with Fan Shuang immediately. "You Qinxiang, don't go overboard. You're using your power to avenge your private grudge." Lu Yichuan shouted angrily. He started to burn his blood essence. He wanted to fight to the death. Yu Tianxiang's expression changed. Lu Yichuan's strength was not much weaker than his. Although he was suppressing Lu Yichuan, he was also injured. Now that Lu Yichuan was burning his blood essence, his strength would increase rapidly. It would be difficult for him to suppress him. "Brother D, don't just watch," Yu Tianxiang shouted. The old man with white hair and a youthful face who was sitting on the tower suddenly stood up. He jumped out and appeared in front of Lu Yichuan. Di Wenxing's right hand formed a palm. Blue energy surged in his palm and landed on Lu Yichuan's chest. Puffed. After burning his blood essence, Lu Yichuan's aura became much stronger. However, he still fell to the ground without any resistance. Lu Yichuan fell to the ground. His aura was weak as he stared at the old man with white hair and a youthful face. "A heaven-trampling transformation realm expert," Lu Yichuan said in fear. Di Wenxing slowly walked down from the sky and landed beside Lu Yichuan. He said indifferently, "Lu Yichuan, you disdained the rules of the territorial lord selection. I have to punish you. Don't blame me." As he said that, Di Wenxing waved his right hand. A dark green fog spread out. Lu Yichuan's eyelids became heavy and he fainted. "Brother D, you really hid your strength well. You actually have a heaven-trampling transformation realm cultivation." Yu Qinxiang came to Di Wenxing's side. His eyes were filled with fear. He had thought that Di Wenxing was only at the peak of the spirit transformation realm. Now, it seemed that he was completely wrong. Di Wenxing's cultivation was much higher than his. It seemed that he did not need to consider the astral weapon fragment in the Clear Heart Society. He was not Di Wenxing's match. "Territorial Lord Yu, I'll leave Lu Yichuan to you. He's much more valuable alive than dead," Di Wenxing said meaningfully. Yu Qianxiang nodded. After he arranged for someone to take Lu Yichuan away, he personally killed all the members of the Clear Heart Society. After he was done, he announced loudly, "The Clear Heart Society has disdained the rules of the territorial lord selection and caused a riot. Therefore, the Yunjin Territorial Lord's Office has the right to arrest all the rioters of the Clear Heart Society. I believe that no one has any objections." Below the arena, the crowd had already hidden far away. Now that Yu Qianxiang had already said this, what else could they say? Anyone with a discerning eye could see that Yu Qianxiang was planning to use this opportunity to make a move on the Clear Heart Society. They had also guessed that the Yunjin Territorial Lord's Office would make a big move against the Clear Heart Society. The dispute between the two major forces in the Yunjin Territorial Lord's Office was naturally not something that unrelated people like them would casually get involved. From the Territorial Lord's Office behind the square, troops of cultivators walked out. There were thousands of them. "Let's go. Today, I, Yu Qianxiang, will go to the Clear Heart Society to demand an explanation. I, Yu Qianxiang, am not a person who likes to cause trouble. However, if anyone dares to bully me, I, Yu Qianxiang, will definitely pursue the matter to the end." After saying that, Yu Qianxiang led the thousands of cultivators and headed towards the Clear Heart Society's encampment. It seems that the Territorial Lord's office is going to make a move on the Clear Heart Society. This is going to be a bloodbath. I think this will be a one-sided battle. The Clear Heart Society's president, Lu Yichuan, has been captured by Yu Tianxiang. Now that the Clear Heart Society has no leader, how can it be a match for the organized Territorial Lord's office? Chapter 37:17. Yijian brought Fan Shuang along, and soon they arrived at the Gujian villa. After they entered the villa, they knocked on Zhuan's door. Creak. Zhuan opened the door and looked at Yijian and Fan Shuang. He frowned and asked, "Isn't today the day of the Grand Lord selection? Why are you back so early?" Fan Shuang said anxiously, "Master Zhua, something bad has happened. The Yunjin Mansion has attacked the Mingxin Society." Fan Shuang told Zhuan everything that had happened during the Grand Lord selection. Zhuan fell into deep thought. He knew that the mansion and the Mingxin Society had a lot of conflicts. It was only a matter of time before the two sides fought. However, he did not expect this day to come so soon. "Villa Master, forgive me for being blunt. The Mingxin Society is done for. This time, a heaven-trampling state elite is helping Yu Tianxiang. The Mingxin Society will not survive. Gujian Villa does not need to get involved in this mess. We could just stay out of it," Yijian said. Fan Shuang was shocked and quickly said, "Gujian Villa belongs to the Mingxin Society. Now that the Mingxin Society is here, Gujian Villa will not be able to escape." Yijian shook his head and said, "Miss Fan Shuang, I think you are mistaken. The first Villa Master and Lu Yichuan were good friends. Although the first Villa Master has fallen, it does not mean that Gujian Villa belongs to the Mingxin Society. The two of them are just partners. The Mingxin Society's enemy is too strong. Gujian Villa's combat power is not strong. We want to help the Mingxin Society, but we are powerless." Fan Shuang's eyes were filled with sadness. After knowing that Di Wenxing was a heaven-trampling state elite, Fan Shuang knew that the Mingxin Society had no hope. So what if Zhuan was strong? In Fan Shuang's eyes, Zhuan's strength was at most at Lu Yichuan's level. He could not save the Mingxin Society. "Master Zhua, I am from the Mingxin Society's business department. Now that the Mingxin Society is in danger, I have to go back and help." Fan Shuang forced a smile at Zhuan and left Gujian Villa. "Manor Lord, let's go back. There's also a second stage Heaven Breaker formation in the manor. It won't be easy for you Tianxiang to break into the manor," Yijian said. "One sword, summon the other 10 sword guards. We're going to the Clear Heart Society's headquarters," Zhuan said calmly. One sword was stunned. He wanted to say something, but when he met Zhuan's cold gaze, he didn't dare to say anything. "Right now, I'm the Villa Master of Gujian Villa. It's not up to you to order me around. Now, gather the 10 sword guards for me. Do you hear me?" Zhuan's voice was bone-chilling as he spoke word by word. One sword could not help but tremble. He hurriedly agreed and entered the ancient sword villa. Not long after, the 10 sword guardians gathered in front of Zhuan. "Go!" Zhuan didn't say much. After saying this, he lifted his foot and walked towards the headquarters of the Clear Heart Society. The 10 swordsmen followed him without saying a word. There was a trace of helplessness in their eyes. In their opinion, going to the Clear Heart Society's rescue was akin to digging one's own grave. However, Zhuan had already obtained their approval as the Villa Master. They followed their hearts and would not go against the Villa Master they had acknowledged. Therefore, this time, the 10 sword guards followed Zhuan with a fearless attitude. Outside the Clear Heart Society's headquarters, the cultivator army of the Overlord Manor had already surrounded it. Yu Tianxiang and Di Wenxing stood in front of the cultivator army and silently looked at the huge manor before them. "Brother Di, that astral weapon fragment is so important. It must be hidden in a secret place. Even if we tear down the Clear Heart Society's headquarters, we might not be able to find it," Yu Tianxiang suddenly said. Di Wenxing smiled and said, "It's okay. Don't we still have Lu Yichuan? Since he's in our hands, I have a way to make him tell us the whereabouts of the astral weapon fragment." I followed you this time to fulfill my promise and help you completely destroy the Clear Heart Society. Yu Qianxiang put on a fake smile as he cupped his fists and said, "Then I'll have to trouble Brother D." Di Wenxing nodded and took a step forward. His body kept growing as if he was stepping on a flight of stairs as he walked up. When Di Wenxing was dozens of meters in the air, he looked down at the Clear Heart Society's headquarters. The corner of his mouth revealed a trace of mockery as he muttered to himself, "There's actually a second-stage heaven-breaking array outside the Clear Heart Society's headquarters. It's a pity that this array can't stop me." Inside the Clear Heart Society's headquarters, everyone was in a state of panic. Many hall masters had gathered together. The martial arts hall was the head of all the hall masters of the Clear Heart Society. At that moment, the martial arts hall master, Shun Wang, stood in front of everyone and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, don't panic. The headquarters has a second-stage heaven-breaking array. The Overlord Manor's people won't be able to break in so easily. We can only wait for the vice president to come out now. With the vice president's strength, he shouldn't be weaker than Yu Tianxiang." Everyone nodded. Lu Yichuan had been captured by Yu Tianxiang. Now that the Clear Heart Society only had the vice president, who was a spirit transformation realm expert, left, everyone naturally placed all their hopes on the vice president. Fan Shuang sent a message. Suddenly, the Minister of Commerce, Fan Yong, excitedly took out his communication Jade Talisman. Under everyone's gaze, Fan Yong opened the communication Jade Talisman. After reading the contents of the communication Jade Talisman, Fan Yong was like a deflated balloon as his head drooped. Everyone's hearts sank. Shen Wang quickly asked, "Minister Fan, what did Miss Fan Shuang say?" Fan Yong smiled bitterly and said, "The Gujian Manor will stay out of this matter and will no longer interfere with the Clear Heart Society's matters." What? Everyone was shocked, and the entire place fell into despair. Damn it, that Zhuoen is our vice president. Now that the Clear Heart Society is in trouble, he actually wants to stay out of this matter. He's too shameless. To think that President Liu trusted him so much. The moment he joined, President Liu gave him the position of vice president. Everyone was in a heated discussion. They were all furious. Bang, bang, bang. At that moment, a terrifying tremor came from outside the headquarters. Soon after, many hall masters were shocked to discover that the array surrounding the headquarters had been easily torn apart. Following that, a figure stepped through the air and arrived. This person is the governor of the Ji province who is here to preside over the Lord Selection. He's a true heaven-trampling realm expert. Even if the vice president is here, he won't be a match for such an expert. Even the governor of the Ji province is standing on Yu Tianxiang's side. Our Clear Heart Society is finished. Everyone felt the terrifying aura from Di Wenxing's body, and a sense of helplessness rose in their hearts. Bang! At the same time, the door of the headquarters was blasted open. Yu Tianxiang led the cultivator army into the headquarters and surrounded all the hall masters in the headquarters. Yo, looks like all the hall masters of the Clear Heart Society have gathered. That's good too. I don't have to look for them one by one. That would be too troublesome, Yu Tianxiang said casually. Chapter 37:18. Hall Master Shun, don't be silly. You're no match for Yu Tianxiang. You'll only be throwing your life away. The other hall masters spoke up to stop Shen Wang. Shen Wang smiled bitterly and said, "Do we have any other choice now? Since I'm the leader of the Clear Heart Hall, I have the obligation to stand up. If I don't, who else will?" Everyone fell silent. "You want to challenge me?" Yu Tianxiang raised his eyebrows and looked at Di Wenxing. Di Wenxing said calmly, "According to the rules, anyone can challenge you for the position of Overlord today." Yu Tianxiang smiled cruelly and said, "If that's the case, I won't hold back later. I'll kill you directly." At that moment, many cultivators who came with the cultivator army to watch the battle were gathered outside the mansion and discussing. They knew that the Clear Heart Society would be removed from Yunjin Ridge from today onwards. Fan Shuang arrived at the periphery of the crowd. When she saw that the formation and the gate of the headquarters had been broken, her expression changed drastically. She did not care about the cultivators in front of her and rushed inside with all her might. At that moment, a hand was placed on Fan Shuang's shoulder. Fan Shuang turned around and was stunned when she saw Zhuan's face. "Master Vu," Fan Shuang said with tears in her eyes, "do I need you to collect my heaven-crushing calamity? Gujin Villa also needs you to take care of it. You can't just walk away like this." Zhuan said calmly, "Master Zhua, you'd better not go in. Diwenxing is here too. He's a heaven-trampling transformation elite. You're no match for him. You should take this opportunity to leave Yunjin Ridge." Fan Shuang smiled bitterly. Zhuan patted Fan Shuang's shoulder and said with a smile, "A heaven-trampling transformation elite might not be able to do anything to me." With that, Zhuan strode toward the gate of the mansion. Zhuan's actions quickly attracted the attention of many onlookers in the surroundings. "Who's that? The Clear Heart Society's headquarters is not peaceful now. This guy actually went in just like that. Does he have a death wish?" In front of the gate, several cultivator soldiers stopped Zhuan. "Tell Yu Tianxiang that I am a new vice president of the Clear Heart Society." Zhuan, although he's Yunjin's suzerain, isn't it a little too arrogant to attack the Clear Heart Society's headquarters like this? These cultivators had strange expressions. They weren't fools and could tell that Zhuan's aura wasn't strong. He was only at the peak of the fifth blight. On the other hand, the surrounding crowd quietened down. Everyone was sizing up Zhuan with strange gazes. They had never heard that the Clear Heart Society actually had a vice president. They also found that the young man who called himself the vice president didn't have a powerful aura. He was only at the peak of the fifth blight. With such a cultivation level, how could she become the vice president of the Clear Heart Society? Was this a joke? The vice president of the Clear Heart Society? Hee, I'm the president of the Clear Heart Society? Little brat, if you know what's good for you, then scram. The cultivators pushed Zhuan and burst into laughter. Their words were filled with insults. However, their expressions quickly changed because Zhuan was as immovable as a rock. "Since you won't let me in, then I can only force my way in." Zhuan's voice was cold. He threw a punch, and the powerful punch swept out like a hurricane. These cultivators were directly sent flying by this punch, and blood splattered everywhere. Then, Zhuan directly stepped into the mansion. The 10 sword guards and Fan Shuang followed closely behind. Behind the gate, there was a large courtyard filled with cultivator soldiers. Within the cultivator army's encirclement, Zhuan saw Shen Wang and Yu Tianxiang. At this moment, Shen Wang was fighting with Yu Tianxiang. Although it was a battle, it was actually a one-sided crushing. Shen Wang wasn't Yu Tianxiang's opponent at all. At this moment, he was seriously injured by Yu Tianxiang. He was lying on the ground and couldn't get up at all. Yu Tianxiang stepped on Shen Wang's body and said indifferently, "You also dare to fight with me with this kind of trash? Why don't you take a look at yourself in the mirror?" As he spoke, Yu Tianxiang suddenly kicked Shen Wang in the chest. Shen Wang let out a blood-curdling scream, and like a kite with a broken string, he flew back towards the door. Zhuan jumped up and caught Shen Wang. He slowly landed not far away. Suddenly, whether it was Yu Tianxiang, the cultivator army, or the various hall masters, all of their gazes fell on Zhuan. It's the vice president. The vice president is finally here. Unlike Yu Tianxiang, who was puzzled, the hall masters of the Clear Heart Society were all cheering as if they had welcomed their savior. Vice president? Yu Tianxiang was puzzled. Like the others, he had never heard of the Clear Heart Society having a vice president. After all, Zhuan had only taken over as the vice president for 2 or 3 days. The Clear Heart Society didn't even have time to publicize it. It was understandable that others didn't know. After Zhuan gave Shen Wang a healing pill, he handed him over to Fan Shuang to take care of. Today is the day of the Overlord selection. It's a big day for Yunjin territory, but I'm not interested. I've never thought of participating in the Overlord selection, but now, Yu Tianxiang, you've made me very unhappy. You actually brought the cultivator army to attack the Clear Heart Society's headquarters and disturbed my cultivation. Today, I'm going to beat you into a pile of shit." Zhuan's voice wasn't loud, but everyone present heard it clearly. Yu Tianxiang was stunned, but then he laughed and said, "Beat me into a pile of shit? You ant, what right do you have? Just based on your peak fifth blight cultivation? I'm dying of laughter. Your Clear Heart Society is really regressing as you develop. Such trash can become the vice president and still boast shamelessly in front of me. I'm afraid there's something wrong with your brain." The cultivator army also roared with laughter along with Yu Tianxiang. Zhuan's eyes were cold. The moment Yu Tianxiang laughed, he took a step forward. Purple snow fell around him, and he disappeared on the spot like a ghost. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Yu Tianxiang. Then, Zhuan unceremoniously punched Yu Tianxiang's face. Bang! Yu Tianxiang flew out in an extremely sorry state and smashed into the wall on the side, causing it to collapse. The cultivator army's laughter suddenly stopped. The surroundings were terrifyingly quiet. Is it very funny? Zhuan stood in the middle of the cultivator army's encirclement. His gaze fell on the ruins where Yu Tianxiang had fallen, and his voice was calm. Di Wenxing, who was originally leisurely leaning on the eaves and watching the show, suddenly became serious when he saw Yu Tianxiang fly out in an instant. Di Wenxing finally looked at Zhuan seriously and revealed a smile. This child is really interesting. He's clearly only at the fifth blight, but he can display the power of someone at the peak of the divine fetal transformation stage. Yu Tianxiang was careless this time and made a fool of himself. From the moment they exchanged blows, Di Wenxing immediately saw Zhuan's true strength. It should be around the peak of the divine fetal transformation stage. If Yu Tianxiang hadn't been careless, Zhuan wouldn't have found a flaw and sent him flying with a punch. Bang! Chapter 37:19. Zhuan's eyes shone with a cold light. The moment Yu Tianxiang rushed over, he also took a step forward and punched out with his right hand. Zhuan had integrated his soul and sword intent into this punch. An extremely terrifying sword intent was brewing in his fist. Bang! When the two fists collided, Yu Tianxiang's eyes revealed a look of horror. He saw that Zhuan's fist was burning with blazing azure lotus flames. Yu Tianxiang let out a blood-curdling scream as his right fist was directly shattered. Then, the green lotus flame wrapped around Yu Tianxiang's right hand like maggots. The blazing temperature continued to rise, burning his right arm to ashes. Yu Tianxiang did not hesitate to cut off his right arm. This azure lotus flame was too strange. It was as if it wanted to swallow his entire body. Boom! The moment Yu Tianxiang cut off his right arm, a foot suddenly stepped on his chest, ruthlessly stomping him back to the ground. Is this all the strength Yunjin Lord has? Then why are you still a lord? You should abdicate as soon as possible. Zhuan's indifferent voice slowly rang out. It was as clear as a bell in the courtyard. In the courtyard, whether it was the cultivator army, the Clear Heart sect master, or the 10 sword guards, all of them seemed to have been petrified. They stood frozen in place, staring at this scene. Di Wenxing, who was originally leisurely leaning on the eaves, suddenly stood up and looked at Zhuan with a serious gaze. Yu Tianxiang was recognized as the strongest cultivator in Yunjin territory. His cultivation had reached the peak of the divine fetus transformation realm. Although he had suffered serious injuries in the battle with Lu Yichuan, his strength was still not to be underestimated. But now, Yu Tianxiang had been defeated in one move by the so-called vice president of the Clear Heart sect who had suddenly appeared. Now he was being stepped on. What made Di Wenxing feel even more incredulous was that the young man who had stepped on Yu Tianxiang had a very weak aura. He was only at the peak of the fifth blight. This kind of cultivation should have been an ant-like existence in his eyes. But now, he had easily defeated an expert like Yu Tianxiang. It can't be. This vice president is actually so strong? Shenhuang forced his eyes open and saw this scene. He was so shocked that he almost jumped up and kept rubbing his eyes. The various hall masters of the Clear Heart Society were so shocked that their jaws almost fell off. Their degree of shock was no less than Shun Wang's. On the other hand, the 10 swordsmen's eyes were shining with excitement. When Zhuowen defeated them, they knew that Zhuowen was terrifyingly strong. He was not any weaker than the first Manor Lord that they worshipped. Otherwise, they wouldn't have obeyed Zhuowen's orders like this. But now, it seemed that they had underestimated Zhuowen. Zhuowen was even stronger than they had imagined. Even a powerhouse like Yu Tianxiang was defeated in one move. You bastard, you're not at the 5th blight. You're actually hiding your cultivation. Damn bastard. Yu Tianxiang almost went crazy. He didn't expect that he would lose, and lose in such an ugly way. He mustered all of his shattered divine power in an attempt to break free from Zhuowen. Zhuowen sneered. He lifted his right foot and stomped down once again. This stomp was too terrifying. Zhuowen directly borrowed the power of his divine soul. It was like a force of 10,000 tons, and the entire courtyard shook a few times. Yu Qianxiang's chest completely caved in. He rolled his eyes in pain and spat out fresh blood. Futile struggle, Zhuowen said disdainfully. Then, he looked at Di Wenxing, who was on the eaves. You're from the Ji Prefecture overseer who came to preside over the Overlord selection, right? Yu Qianxiang, this good-for-nothing, was beaten half to death by me. According to the rules of the Overlord selection, I should be the new Overlord of Yunjin Ridge. Zhuowen said faintly. Di Wenxing's eyes flickered, but he fell silent, which was rare. Brother Di, I didn't lose. This person used despicable means to sneak an attack on me and cause me to lose my combat power. You can't let this despicable person go, and you can't let him become the new Overlord. Kill him, kill him. Yu Qianxiang struggled to look at Di Wenxing. He lifted his head with difficulty and used all of his strength to finish this sentence. However, what he received was another stomp from Zhuowen. This time, Zhuowen didn't hold back. He directly stomped on Yu Tianxiang's face. The power of his divine soul sword intent gushed out from his right foot and blasted into the area between Yu Tianxiang's eyebrows. Zhuowen's divine soul was too powerful. After he cultivated the green lotus visualization chart to its peak, his divine soul had already reached the peak of the heaven-crushing 3rd transformation. Such a powerful divine soul was enough to allow him to fight with a mid-stage or even late-stage heaven-trampling transformation expert. Yu Tianxiang's whole body twitched. Finally, his body straightened and completely stiffened. His divine soul had been completely crushed by the divine soul sword intent at that moment. The Overlord is dead. The surrounding cultivator army immediately noticed the lifeless Yu Tianxiang. They were instantly thrown into chaos. They looked at Zhuowen in horror, as if they had seen a ghost. Di Wenxing's eyes immediately darkened. He didn't expect that Zhuowen would be so bold, actually killing Yu Tianxiang in front of him. You actually dare to kill him? Di Wenxing's words were filled with killing intent. The weak are prey to the strong are revered. Yu Tianxiang was weaker than me. Being killed by me is a matter of course. Otherwise, the one dead would be me. Moreover, there's no such thing as stopping at a certain point in the Overlord selection. I have the strength. Is it wrong to kill him? Zhuowen said calmly. Di Wenxing laughed loudly and said, Good. You said it very well. In this world, the weak being killed by the strong is a matter of course. But Yu Tianxiang is my old friend. You're very bold to kill him in front of me. The killing intent on Di Wenxing's body was no longer concealed. It filled the entire courtyard like a hurricane. Everyone in the Clear Heart Society felt their hearts clench. They were terrified. Di Wenxing was a heaven-trampling state elite and was sent by the Ji Prefecture governor. He was no ordinary person. Master Zhua quickly apologized to Master Di. He's from the Ji Prefecture governor's side. He has a powerful background, Fan Shuang hurriedly said. The other hall leaders of the Clear Heart Society also urged Zhuowen to quickly apologize to Di Wenxing. Di Wenxing, was different from Yu Tianxiang. It was fine if Yu Tianxiang was killed, but Di Wenxing was not to be offended. They're right. I'm someone you can't afford to offend. If you kneel down and apologize to me now, I might consider forgiving you. Di Wenxing looked down at Zhuowen from above, his tone full of arrogance. You're not worthy. If you want to live, you should kneel in front of me and apologize to me. That's your only way out now. Chapter 3720. It's over. Fan Shuang's face turned as white as a sheet. After Zhuowen said those words, she knew that there was no turning back for her. The Hall Masters of the Clear Heart Society hung their heads low. They could imagine Zhuowen's miserable state. Although Zhuowen had shocked them by killing Yu Tianxiang in an instant, Di Wenxing was much stronger than Yu Tianxiang. They did not think that Zhuowen was a match for Di Wenxing. Di Wenxing was stunned. This was the first time he had seen such an arrogant guy. You're courting death. Di Wenxing did not want to waste any more time with Zhuowen. He jumped down from the roof, and a purplish-blue broadsword appeared in his right hand. Di Wenxing, who was still in midair, swung the broadsword in his right hand at Zhuowen. The terrifying broadsword light swept out like a huge dragon and arrived in front of Zhuowen in an instant. Zhuowen released his spiritual soul sword intent. Wherever he pointed his sword, the sword intent was like the wind. The broadsword light was easily shattered by the spiritual soul sword intent. At this moment, Zhuowen also moved. He charged directly at Di Wenxing, who was still in midair. You're courting death. Di Wenxing's killing intent surged when he saw that Zhuowen did not retreat. Instead, he charged forward. He swung the broadsword in his right hand at Zhuowen. Ghost had 9 broadswords. Di Wenxing used his strongest mystique, the ghost had 9 broadswords. He quickly swung the broadsword 9 times. The terrifying broadsword light turned pitch black and then turned into 9 ghost heads. The 9 ghost heads surrounded Zhuowen in an instant. They opened their mouths and spat out a thick black fog, which completely engulfed Zhuowen. The corners of Di Wenxing's mouth curled into a sneer. The moment he used this sacred art, he knew that Zhuowen was dead for sure. The ghost head 9 broadswords could create 9 ghost heads. When the 9 ghost heads were combined, they formed a terrifying barrier. Within the barrier, there were many strange broadsword shadows. Each of the broadsword shadows was extremely sharp and powerful. Any cultivator within the barrier would be smashed into pieces by the broadsword shadows. There was no chance of survival. Bang, bang, bang. But soon, Di Wenxing's expression changed. He discovered that the 9 ghost heads were exploding one after another. When the 9th ghost head exploded, a figure flew out like a god. He was surrounded by 9 divine swords, each of which was burning with terrifying green lotus flames. Die! Zhuowen's voice was very calm. The moment he neared Di Wenxing, 9 spirit sword intents blasted Di Wenxing's body at the same time. Di Wenxing quickly brandished his saber to defend against the attacks of the soul sword intent. But he soon discovered in despair that the power of the sword intent of the soul was much stronger than he had imagined. His saber shattered, and his body was pierced through by the 9 soul sword intents, exploding into a bloody mist in midair. He couldn't be any more dead. After killing Di Wenxing, the 9 spirit sword intents entered the space between his eyebrows, while Zhuowen slowly landed in the courtyard. The courtyard was terrifyingly quiet. One could even hear a pin drop. After a long while, the Hall Masters of the Clear Heart Society all knelt down and shouted, "Long live the Vice President!" The 10 swordsmen prostrated themselves in admiration. They knelt on the ground and shouted the Manor Lord's name. The cultivators looked at each other and smiled bitterly. They also knelt down and bowed to Zhuowen. Zhuowen had used his strength to prove himself, and today was the day of the suzerain selection. Therefore, Zhuowen was already fully deserving of the title of the new suzerain. Zhuowen stood in the middle of the courtyard and looked around at the people who were kneeling and bowing to him. He sighed in his heart. In the 100 Outer Territories, strength was the only thing that mattered. As long as you were strong enough, you would be able to obtain all the respect and resources. In this place, the strong were always strong, and the weak were always weak. If you didn't want to be eliminated, then you had to constantly become stronger. Only by becoming strong enough could you have a foothold in this vast world. No way. Di Wenxing and Yu Tianxiang were both killed. Was it done by the young man who just went in? Damn, is this guy really at the fifth blight? How can he be so strong? This strength is a little unimaginable. The cultivators who were watching outside all entered the courtyard. They witnessed the scene of Di Wenxing being destroyed by the Soul Sword intent. They also saw the Clear Heart Society and the cultivators reaching an agreement to kneel and bow to Zhuowen. At this moment, they were also affected. Their discussion stopped, and they involuntarily knelt down. They looked at Zhuowen with eyes full of curiosity and awe. From now on, I am the Yunjin suzerain. In Yunjin territory, I have the final say in everything. I am the rule of Yunjin territory. Also, tear down the original suzerain's manor and banish all of you Tianxiang's clansmen. In the future, the Gujian villa where I live will be the suzerain's manor. After Zhuowen finished speaking calmly, he led the 10 swordsmen and Fan Shuang past everyone and left the courtyard. After Zhuowen left, everyone in the courtyard heaved a sigh of relief. The pressure that Zhuowen gave them was too great. Experts like you, Tianxiang and Di Wenxing, were easily dealt with by this person. How could they dare to offend such an expert? With the help of others, Shun Wang reluctantly came to the cultivator army's leader and asked in a deep voice, "Where is our President Lu now?" The cultivator army's leader was a rather young man. He replied, "Hall Master Shun, don't worry. President Lu is not safe now. He is still in the suzerain's manor." Now that the Yunjin suzerain had been replaced and Yu Tianxiang was dead, there was no need for the cultivator army of the suzerain's manor to keep Lu Yi locked up. Xin Wang nodded and said in a deep voice, "Take us there quickly." The cultivator army's leader was straightforward. He led the cultivator army, Shun Wang, and the others to the suzerain's manor. Although the cultivator army's leader's status was higher than Xin Wang's, he knew very well that the new suzerain was the vice president of the Clear Heart Society and had an unusual relationship with the Clear Heart Society. Now, he had to build a good relationship with the Clear Heart Society. Otherwise, he might suffer in the future. This was also the reason why he was so cooperative. "Lord Zhua, you killed Di Wenxing. I'm afraid there will be trouble. Di Wenxing is from a Murong family, one of the 4 great families of the Ji province." Fan Shuang followed closely behind Zhuowen and said worriedly, "It's fine. Di Wenxing was the one who targeted me first. If the Murong family really comes, I will record today's scene and show it to the Murong family when the time comes." Zhuowen did not mind. He knew very well that his strength was much stronger than Di Wenxing's. When the Murong family found out, they would most likely not kill him, but rope him in. At least until the Murong family found out about this and came to Yunjin territory, Zhuowen would be very safe. "Fan Shuang, I will have to trouble you with the trivial matters of the suzerain's manor. Also, prepare the things I need to pass the tribulation as soon as possible. I need to break through as soon as possible." Zhuowen realized that he had stayed in the 5th decay for too long. This time, if he could successfully pass the heaven-crushing tribulation, with his accumulation during this period, he would directly advance to the late stage of the divine transformation stage. Moreover, after the heaven-crushing tribulation, he would be able to truly cultivate the primordial technique. Chapter 37:21. The cultivator army led the hall masters of the Clear Heart Society into the Overlord's mansion and arrested everyone from the Yu family. "Guild Master Lu is in that room. Go in and release Guild Master Lu. I still have to follow Lord Zhua's orders to capture Yu Tianxiang and tear down the Overlord's mansion." The leader of the cultivator army pointed at a house in front of them. After explaining to Shun Wang and the others, he led the cultivator army into the Overlord's mansion and began to arrest the rest of Yu Tianxiang's followers. After Shen Wang and the others broke into the house, they found Lu Yichuan tied to a tree in the yard. Lu Yichuan also noticed Shen Wang and the others and was overjoyed. However, he was too weak and could not speak coherently. Shen Wang and the others quickly untied Lu Yichuan and took out healing pills for him to consume. After a while, Lu Yichuan's face began to redden. Shen Wang, how did you get into the Overlord's mansion? Were you also captured by Yu Tianxiang? Lu Yichuan looked at them in confusion. Shen Wang and the others looked at each other. Finally, Shen Wang smiled bitterly and said, Guild Master Lu, Yu Tianxiang is dead. The Overlord of Yunjin Hill has changed hands. What? Yu Tianxiang is dead? Who killed him? Lu Yichuan was shocked. Lu Yichuan had personally fought Yu Tianxiang and knew how terrifying the latter was. It could be said that Yu Tianxiang's strength was very close to that of a heaven-trampling Change Realm elite. There was actually an elite in Yunjin Hill who could kill Yu Tianxiang. It was the Vice President. Shen Wang said in awe. Vice President? Are you talking about Zhuan? Lu Yichuan's eyes narrowed, and he could not help but cry out. Yes, it was Lord Zhua. Yu Tianxiang was killed by Lord Zhua in one hit. Shen Wang's voice became more and more respectful. Killed in one hit? Lu Yichuan's eyes widened, and his eyeballs almost popped out. Yu Tianxiang was so powerful, but he was killed by Zhuan in one hit. This world was crazy. Was Di Wenxing the one who gave Zhuan the overlord position of Yunjin Hill? Lu Yichuan thought of something and asked Shen Wang. Shen Wang touched his nose and smiled bitterly. Di Wenxing was also killed by Lord Zhua. He's so powerful that he doesn't need to be conferred the title of Overlord of Yunjin. Lu Yichuan was numb. After a long time, he said bitterly, I was wrong this time. Zhuan is so powerful. Who is he? 3 days later, the Lord's mansion was completely demolished, and Yu Tianxiang's remaining forces were basically exiled. The Cultivator Army's army leader led the Cultivator Army, led Army Cultivators Army's army manner. From then on, the Overlord's Overlord. SSSS. SS. Fan Shuang walked over and knelt in front of Zhuan. She said respectfully, Master Zhua, everything for the heavenly tribulation has been prepared. Zhuan's eyes lit up. Thank you for your hard work. Ask your men to bring everything to my room. Fan Shuang hesitated. Lord Zhua, the Clear Heart Society is in charge of the heavenly tribulations. They are still in the Clear Heart Society's headquarters. What happened? Zhuan narrowed his eyes and asked. President Lu wants to see you. That's why he kept the heavenly tribulations items. Fan Shuang said hesitantly. If he wants to see me, he can just come to the Overlord's Overlord. Why did he keep the items for my heavenly tribulations? Zhuan's eyes flashed coldly. Fan Shuang's eyes flickered. After a moment of silence, she continued, President Lu has been working hard to become the Overlord of Yunjin Hill for so many years. Lord Zhua, you become the Overlord. Maybe he's upset. Zhuan sneered. If that's the case, I'll go to the Clear Heart Society's headquarters. Fan Shuang, inform the 10 swordsmen to follow me to the Clear Heart Society. Fan Shuang's heart skipped a beat. She braced herself and nodded. Soon, Zhuan led the 10 swordsmen and Fan Shuang into the Clear Heart Society's headquarters. The Clear Heart Society's guards recognized Zhuan. Hence, they did not dare to stop Zhuan. President Lu, come out and see me. Zhuan came to the courtyard of the Clear Heart Society's headquarters. His voice reverberated throughout the entire Clear Heart Society. After a while, Lu Yichuan led Shen Wang and a few other hall leaders of the Clear Heart Society out with a smile. Lord Zhua, you've arrived. Forgive me for not going out to meet you. Lu Yichuan said with a smile. Lu Yichuan, I'm very patient. I'll give you 15 minutes. Bring out the items for the heavenly tribulations immediately. Otherwise, don't blame me for turning my back on you. Zhuan's eyes were burning with murderous intent. He did not give Lu Yichuan any face. He had been preparing for the heavenly tribulations for so many days. At this moment, Lu Yichuan actually played such a trick on him. Zhuan could not help but feel a little angry. Lu Yichuan sensed the terrifying murderous intent. His expression changed slightly. However, He quickly regained his composure and said in a low voice, Lord Jua, don't forget that I'm the one who promoted you to be the vice president of the Clear Heart Society. The items for the heavenly tribulations are the resources of the Clear Heart Society. Although you're powerful, you shouldn't be so unreasonable. Zhuan's expression darkened. He said, then what do you want? Lu Yichuan smiled and said, Lord Jua, this is very simple. As long as you pass the position of the Lord to me, all the resources of the Clear Heart Society will be yours. Fan Shuang's expression changed drastically. She said in a low voice, President Liu, your request is too much. Back then, you were defeated by Yu Tianxiang and were captured alive. Your fate is unknown. If Lord Jua had not defeated Yu Tianxiang, would you still be alive? Now, not only are you not grateful, you even want Lord Jua to give up the position of the Lord. What right do you have? Lu Yichuan looked coldly at Fan Shuang and continued, Lord Jua, I don't mean anything else. I can see that you don't care about the position of the Lord. As long as you give up the position of the Lord to me, everything can be discussed. I will do my best to fulfill all your requests. Zhuan's gaze was calm. He stared at Lu Yichuan and said calmly, You want me to give up the position? Lu Yichuan felt a chill down his spine when he saw Zhuan's gaze. He took a deep breath and bowed deeply. He said, This is what I've been pursuing for so many years. It's also the goal that I've been working hard for all these years. I hope that Lord Jua can fulfill my wish. Just as Lu Yichuan finished speaking, a terrifying aura blasted toward him. Lu Yichuan groaned and spat out a mouthful of blood. He flew out in a sorry state and crashed heavily onto the ground. He spat out a mouthful of blood. President Shen Wang and the other hall masters quickly helped Lu Yichuan up. They looked at Zhuan in horror. Chapter 37:22. Lu Yichuan stood up reluctantly. His eyes flashed with hatred as he said to Shen Wang, Give Lord Jua's item to him. Shen Wang nodded and threw a spiritual ring to Fan Shuang. Fan Shuang checked it and nodded to Zhuan. Lu Yichuan, don't do it again. Don't think that I'm patient. If you dare to threaten me with something in front of me again, I won't be merciful. After Zhuan finished speaking, he left with Fan Shuang and the 10 swordsmen. President, are you okay? Shen Wang and the rest asked nervously. Lu Yichuan's eyes were full of hatred. He said in a low voice, I didn't expect Zhuan to come after you. Tianxiang left. I've raised an ingrate. Zhuan really doesn't know what's good for him. Shen Wang sighed and said, President Liu, Zhuan is too strong. He's stronger than you Tianxiang and Diwenxing. Moreover, we don't have any conflict of interest with him. There's no need to strain our relationship. Lu Yichuan said coldly, I can still challenge Zhuan. That thing is about to be completed. Once that thing is completed, my strength will reach an unprecedented level. Originally, I planned to use that thing to deal with Yu Tianxiang. I didn't expect to use it on Zhuan this time. Shen Wang's expression changed drastically. He said in a low voice, President, that thing you're talking about isn't the fire toad, right? Lu Yichuan nodded and said, That's the ultimate secret of our Clear Heart Society. I figured it out now. Why did Diwenxing suddenly attack me? He's probably after the fire toad. Now that Diwenxing and Yu Tianxiang have been killed by Zhuan, no one will know about this. That Zhuan won't know either. This is my only chance. Shen Wang sighed and didn't try to persuade Lu Yichuan. He knew very well that Lu Yichuan's insistence on becoming the Lord of Yunjin territory wasn't because of greed or vanity. Everything he did was because of a promise. It was because of this agreement that Lu Yichuan had to carry a heavy burden and stagger forward. Shen Wang had watched Lu Yichuan walk all the way here, so he was most aware of the pain and suffering Lu Yichuan had gone through. Guildmaster, we understand your persistence. As for the fire toad, all the brothers in our guild will contribute. We will not let you take on this alone, Shen Wang suddenly said. Lu Yichuan looked at Shen Wang, his eyes suddenly wet. He said in a low voice, Shen Wang, thank you for always supporting me, and the brothers in the guild who never left me. Shen Wang smiled brightly and said, "What's wrong with that? We established the Clear Heart Society when we had nothing. From the very beginning, we were of one mind with you, President." Zhuowen spent 3 days in the Gujian villa to adjust his condition before leaving Yunjin City. When he left the main city this time, he did not tell anyone. The heaven-crushing tribulation was too important to him. He had just arrived in Yunjin City not long ago, so he did not have any foundation and did not trust anyone completely. Even the 10 sword guards, he did not fully trust them. As such, he didn't reveal anything about the heaven-crushing tribulation. After he was far enough away from the main city, Zhuowen landed in a remote canyon. This canyon was very large. It stretched out for thousands of miles, and the sides were dozens of miles wide. Zhuowen summoned the Thunder Fire Sword, Death Sacrifice Sword, and Blood Immortal Sword from the macro world. Ever since these 3 divine swords entered the 100 domains, their cultivation progress had been much faster. Especially Xiao He, whose cultivation was close to Zhuowen's, had already reached the 5th heaven's decay. Although the Death Sacrifice Sword and Blood Immortal Sword were slightly weaker, they also had the cultivation of the 3rd heaven's decay. Zhuowen handed several array discs to Xiao He and warned, "Xiao He, I'm about to undergo the tribulation. This tribulation will be very terrifying. I'm afraid of attracting attention. Place this concealment array outside the canyon and try to hide my tribulation. Also protect me. If anyone comes, inform me in advance so that I can be prepared." Xiao He took the array discs and solemnly agreed. Then, she left the canyon with the Death Sacrifice Sword and Blood Immortal Sword. Zhuowen stood in the middle of the canyon and took out piles of items for the tribulation from his spirit ring. These were all items that Fan Shuang had collected for him. Because he knew that his tribulation would be extraordinary, he had asked Fan Shuang to collect a lot of items. Let's begin. Zhuowen no longer suppressed his aura. In an instant, he broke through the peak of the 5th heaven's decay and stepped into the divine transformation stage. At this moment, the clouds in the sky changed. Under Zhuowen's shocked gaze, black holes appeared one after another. There were a total of 3 black holes floating in the sky. Within each black hole, there was an extremely terrifying tribulation aura brewing. Zhuowen's body tensed up as he completely mobilized the shattered divine power in his body. He could feel that this tribulation would be even more terrifying than his 5th heaven's decay tribulation. He could not be too careless. As Zhuowen began to transcend the tribulation, a man and a woman appeared outside the gates of Yunjin City. They were a white-haired old man and a beautiful young woman. I didn't expect Yunjin City to be so far away from Sangyan Forest. It took us 7 or 8 months to get here on foot. The young woman looked at the huge city gates in front of her and said excitedly. The old man was also moved. He sighed and said, "Sangyan Forest is considered the border of Yunjin City. It's a long journey. If we can take the divine ship and the teleportation arrays in the villages, we can reach Yunjin City in less than a month." The young woman curled her lips and said, "Whether it's the teleportation array or the divine ship, it's too expensive. We can't afford it." If Zhuowen was here, he would not be unfamiliar with the old man and the young woman. These 2 people were pharmacist Lu and Lu Miaozhen. They were also Zhuowen's benefactors who saved him when he first entered the bounded domain. The 2 of them were not as lucky as Zhuowen. As soon as they left Sangyan Forest, they could meet caravans and guards who could take the divine ship for free. The 2 of them walked from Sangyan Forest to Yunjin City, Lord's residence. After all, they did not have many boundary stones on them and did not have extra money to use the teleportation array or take the divine ship. Therefore, although the 2 of them left Sangyan Forest more than half a year earlier than Zhuowen, they arrived at Yunjin City a few days later than Zhuowen. The Lord of Yunjin City should still be Yu Tianxiang. Although there is a Lord selection recently, with Yu Tianxiang's strength, he should be able to keep the Lord position, Pharmacist Lu said with a smile. The 2 of you are outsiders, right? The Lord of Yunjin City is no longer Yu Tianxiang. A man passing by could not help but interrupt when he heard Pharmacist Lu's words. Pharmacist Lu asked curiously, "Not Yu Tianxiang? Could it be that it has been replaced by Lu Yichuan, the president of the Clear Heart Society?" Pharmacist Lu had some understanding of the forces in Yunjin City. He knew that Lu Yichuan was very strong and was a strong competitor for the position of Yunjin City Lord. Since Yu Tianxiang was no longer the Lord, it could only be Lu Yichuan. It's not Lu Yichuan either. It's a guy who suddenly popped out. I think his name is Zhuowen. The man said, "What? Zhuowen?" Pharmacist Lu and Lu Miaozhen's jaws dropped in surprise. Chapter 37:23. Do you know Lord Zhua? A man passing by asked in surprise when he saw the expressions on Apothecary Lu and Lu Miaozhen's faces. Apothecary Lu waved his hand and said, "I don't think so. However, I have an old friend with the same name. However, his strength is very weak, so he probably has the same name." The man passing by nodded and didn't think much of it. After bidding farewell to the two, he entered the main city. "Grandfather, could Lord Zhua really be Big Brother Zhua?" Lu Miaozhen asked uncertainly. Apothecary Lu shook his head and said, "Although I don't know Zhuowen's exact cultivation, I can sense that he doesn't have the cultivation of Heaven Breaker. With his strength, it's impossible for him to become Yunjin Overlord. Moreover, he suffered such serious injuries. He would have to recuperate in the Yuan tribe for at least a few months. It's impossible for him to reach Yunjin Ridge before us." Lu Miaozhen nodded and changed the topic. "Grandfather, do you think the Ascension sect will really recruit disciples in Yunjin Ridge?" Apothecary Lu smiled and said, "Yes, your grandfather has been traveling between Yunjin Ridge and Ash Cloud Forest all these years. In the Ji Prefecture, the 5 sects will come to the various territories under the Ji Prefecture to recruit talented disciples every 10 years. Miaozhen, with your Taoist root, it's more than enough for you to join the Ascension sect, which has the strongest foundation among the 5 sects." Lu Miaozhen's beautiful eyes dimmed and said, "Grandfather, if I join the Ascension sect, can you join the sect with me?" Apothecary Lu smiled and stroked Lu Miaozhen's beautiful hair and said, "Grandfather is already so old, so I can't go. However, Miaozhen, you must remember that grandfather will leave you one day. You must learn to constantly strive for self-improvement, understand?" Lu Miaozhen's eyes revealed a resolute light as she nodded heavily. Rumble. Suddenly, an ear-piercing sound of muffled thunder came from dozens of miles away from the main city. Lu Miaozhen, Apothecary Lu, and the crowd at the city gate couldn't help but raise their heads. They saw a huge flying fish that was over 10,000 feet long falling from the sky. The flying fish's aura was extremely terrifying. Its entire body was covered in blazing lightning that crackled incessantly. It was extremely ear-piercing, for figures stood on the flying fish's back. The leader was a young man with a slightly pale face. 2 beautiful women with graceful figures stuck to the young man's body. Their breaths were like orchids, and they were extremely seductive. Behind the 3 of them stood a man in a black robe and a hood. However, because of the hood, the man's face was covered, and his appearance could not be seen clearly. After the flying fish landed on the ground, everyone at the city gate involuntarily retreated to the sides and opened up a path. Most of them were cultivators who weren't very strong or mortals with power and status. Although the 4 of them did not display powerful auras, merely the flying fish that they controlled were extraordinary. They were much more powerful than the 4 of them. It could be seen that these 4 people were not ordinary people. This is the main city of Yunjin. Is this where Di Wenxing disappeared? The pale-faced young man spoke in an indifferent tone as he held the women in his arms. Soon after, he sized up the huge city gate in front of him. "That's right. Di Wenxing is here on young master's orders to search for that thing. Since he suddenly disappeared without a trace, it seems that the mission has failed," the black-robed man said in a deep voice. "Humph. It seems that the Mingxin Society has some skills. Since he can get rid of Di Wenxing, It means that the Mingxin society has already mastered the fire toad. The young man's face darkened. The black-robed man nodded and said, "It should be so. The fire toad that the Mingxin society has mastered is extremely damaged, and only a small part of it is left. However, if they can really awaken the power of the fragments of the fire toad, eliminating Di Wenxing will be a piece of cake." The young man said calmly, "However, with you here, even if they can unleash the power of the fire toad, so what? After all, it is only a very damaged and powerful star weapon. Its power is at most equivalent to a heaven-breaking level 3 divine weapon." The black-robed man nodded and said, "Young master is right. This subordinate will do his best and will not let you down." The young man nodded and indifferently glanced at the trembling crowd at the city gate. A trace of disdain flashed in his eyes. When his gaze fell on Lu Miaojin, it suddenly stopped. He carefully sized up Lu Miaojin, and his eyes revealed a look of ecstasy. This woman, the water aura on her body, is very dense. This is the spiritual water root. The young man suddenly said excitedly, "What? It's actually the spiritual water root? This is a supreme-grade Tao root that's hard to come by in 100 years. It's the best material for a cultivation furnace. Young master, you're truly blessed to have encountered such a supreme-grade item." The black-robed man also noticed the dense water aura on Lu Miaojin's body, and he hurriedly congratulated the young man. "Stop being so wishy-washy. Quickly make a move and capture this woman for me. With this woman, this young master's cultivation will advance by leaps and bounds. Let's see who in Morone clan dares to say that my natural talent is inferior to my big brother's." The young man laughed excitedly. The black-robed man nodded and took a step forward to flash towards Lu Miaojin. When Lu Miaojin noticed that the young man was sizing her up, she felt that something was off. Now, when she saw the black-robed man actually directly flash towards her, her beautiful eyes revealed a look of terror. She truly couldn't figure out why a lofty heaven-breaking expert like the young man would make a move against her. Miaojin, quickly flee into the main city. Alchemist Lu withdrew a formation disc from his pocket and suddenly threw out. Then, he pulled Lu Miaojin and charged into the main city. The black-robed man casually waved his hand. He didn't care about the formation disc that Alchemist Lu threw out. In his eyes, Alchemist Lu was merely an ant-like mortal. How powerful could his formation disc be? However, he soon discovered that the formation disc had just touched him when it immediately self-destructed, and his figure also paused at this moment. It was precisely because of this that Alchemist Lu and Lu Miaojin had already fled into the main city. Damn it, I was actually tricked by a mortal. The black-robed man's eyes were gloomy as he quickly chased into the city gates. Not long after, he came out of the city gates again with a gloomy expression. "Where are they?" the young man asked with a frown when he saw the black-robed man come out empty-handed. The black-robed man lowered his head and said, "Young master, although that old man is immortal, he has some tricks up his sleeve. After they entered the main city, I actually couldn't sense their auras anymore." The young man's face was gloomy. He walked up and slapped the black-robed man. He said coldly, "Trash, you can even lose track of a mortal." The black-robed man covered his face, not daring to refute. This time, it was indeed his responsibility. Set up this confinement formation in Yunjin Hill. From now on, the people in Yunjin Hill won't be able to take a single step out of the main city. Whether it's the Clear Heart Society's fire toad or that woman with the spirit water root, I want them both," the young man said coldly. Chapter 3724. A strong wave of array Tao spread out around the main city. Instantly, the main city was surrounded by a strong wave of array Tao, forming an impenetrable barrier. When the array Tao was formed, all the cultivators in the main city seemed to have sensed it. They raised their heads and looked above the main city. Their eyes were filled with uncertainty. In the Gujin villa, the 10 sword guards, who were cultivating in the courtyard, opened their eyes. They looked above the main city, and their expressions changed. Big brother, there's a strong wave of array Dao around the main city. Someone has set up an unknown array Dao outside the main city. 10 swords said with a frown. One sword looked serious and said, "What is going on?" Someone dares to set up an array Dao around the main city in Yunjin City. Who is so bold? At that moment, the leader of the cultivator army rushed in from the outside. One sword, where is the Grand Lord? Someone has set up an imprisonment array outside the main city. They are trying to imprison everyone in the main city. The leader of the cultivator army said, with a panicked expression, "Do you know who did it?" One sword asked angrily. "There are 4 people. We don't know who they are yet. They are heading towards the Gujin villa." The leader of the cultivator army said in a low voice, "Let's go. Let's report to the Grand Lord." One sword stood up and led the few of them to Zhuan's room. However, there was no reply after knocking on the door many times. The Grand Lord is not in the main city now. He went out early in the morning. What happened? Fan Shuang walked in from the corridor and asked One Sword and the rest. One Sword and the rest's eyes lit up. They had already guessed where Zhuan had gone. Thus, One Sword told Fan Shuang everything that had happened in the main city. What? Who are those 4 people? How dare they do such a bold thing? Fan Shuang's face changed. He bold? Our young master is the son of the Morong family. With his status, even if he killed everyone in Yunjin City, he would still be forgiven. But you guys are the ones who have the guts to make such a big fuss. Fan Shuang and the others couldn't help but look over. They saw a small boat floating above the Gujin villa. 4 figures stood on the divine ship. The one who spoke was the black-robed man. Morong family. Fan Shuang and the 10 swordsmen were shocked. They were no strangers to the Morong family. After all, they were one of the 4 great families of the Ji province's prefecture overseer. After all, the Morong family was in charge of dozens of territories like Yunjin Hill. Given the power of the Morong family, it would be a piece of cake for them to destroy Yunjin Hill. Young Master Morong, we didn't know that you'd come from afar. We've neglected you. I wonder why young Master Morong has come to Yunjin Hill this time? If there's anything the Overlord's residents can do to help, we'll do it without hesitation. Fan Shuang reacted quickly. She immediately changed her attitude and said humbly. The young man hugged the beautiful maidservant with both hands and said indifferently, "I really do have something to ask of the Grand Lord's mansion." As he spoke, the youth tossed a crystal ball to Fan Shuang. Mobilize the forces of the Overlord's mansion and capture the woman in the crystal ball. Once we capture her, I'll immediately remove the imprisonment array outside the main city. The youth said indifferently. Fan Shuang took the crystal ball and saw Lu Miaozhen's face in it. Young Master Morong, don't worry. We'll capture this woman as soon as possible. Although Fan Shuang did not know what the relationship between this woman and the youth was, she knew that she could not reject young Master Morong. Otherwise, the Overlord's residence would be finished. She could feel that the black-robed man's aura was very powerful. He was much more powerful than Diwenxing. All right, once we capture this woman, use the crystal ball to contact me. After the youth finished speaking, the divine ship disappeared from the sky above the villa. Why did the Morong family suddenly come to Yunjin Hill? One Sword asked in confusion. Fan Shuang shook her head. She was also confused. Yunjin Hill was such a small place. Why would the Morong family be interested in it? She could not figure it out. After the divine ship left Gujin Hill, it headed straight for the Clear Heart Society's headquarters. In a secret chamber in the Clear Heart Society's headquarters, Lu Yichuan sat cross-legged. A small fragment the size of a fingernail was floating in front of him. The fragment emitted a blazing flame aura. The temperature of the aura was extremely high, and it kept rising. Finally, it took the form of a toad. The toad was burning with flames. When it opened its mouth, it spat out an endless sea of fire. When it closed its mouth, the sea of fire was completely devoured. The fire toad suddenly turned into a ray of fire and entered Lu Yichuan's right arm, forming a pattern of a fire toad. However, the pattern was very illusory and could not be seen clearly. Louis Chuan suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were shining with excitement. He could not help but laugh. "I've finally merged with the power of the fire toad. With the fire toad, Zhuan is no match for me." When Louis Chuan walked out of the secret chamber, he saw hundreds of cultivators of the Clear Heart Society sitting cross-legged in the huge courtyard outside the secret chamber. Shen Wang was sitting at the front. However, these hundreds of people were all pale, and their lips were cracked. They looked very weak. Louis Chuan knelt down in front of them and said, "Everyone, thank you for sharing your blood essence to help me nourish the fire toad. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to successfully activate the power of the fire toad. All of you are my benefactors." Shen Wang stood up with difficulty and helped Louis Chuan up. "President, you're too polite. You being able to control the power of the fire toad is beneficial to our Clear Heart Society. Our Clear Heart Society's prosperity is all on you, President." Louis Chuan cried tears of joy. He had spent too much time for this day. In the end, the heavens did not let down those who worked hard. He succeeded. Boom, boom, boom. Right at this moment, a terrifying sound came from the headquarters of the Clear Heart Society. "Louis Chuan, get out here." Along with the sound of the tremors was a loud shout. Louis Chuan frowned slightly and looked up. He saw that a divine ship had appeared in the sky above the Clear Heart Society. A black-robed man stood at the bow of the divine ship. He casually threw out attacks that landed on the Clear Heart Society's headquarters and caused great damage. Louis Chuan was furious. After asking Shen Wang and the others to hide in the secret chamber, he leaped to the top of the Clear Heart Society's tallest tower and said coldly, "I'm Louis Chuan. Why are you behaving atrociously in my Clear Heart Society?" The black-robed man stopped attacking and looked at Louis Chuan at the top of the tower. He grinned and said, "So you're Louis Chuan? We're from the Morong family. Hand over the fire toad. We'll leave your corpse intact." Louis Chuan's pupil shrank. He did not expect the Morong family to come looking for him. They were one of the 4 major families of Ji province. Their power was far from what Yunjin Hill could compare to. "I don't know what the fire toad you're talking about is. You've got the wrong person," Louis Chuan said in a low voice. The black-robed man grinned and took a step forward. He clenched his right hand into a fist and blasted it toward Louis Chuan. A heaven-trampling change, elite. Louis Chuan's expression changed drastically. The black-robed man's attack put too much pressure on him. He had no choice but to use the power of the fire toad. In an instant, the blazing flames formed a continuously rotating earth-fire shield in front of him. Bang! The black-robed man's fist landed on the fire shield. It paused for a moment before the fire shield shattered. However, the black-robed man was forced to take a few steps back in the air. Chapter 3725. In the depths of the canyon, a charred figure fell from the sky and crashed heavily into the ground. The terrifying force of the collision caused the entire canyon to tremble violently. The charred figure smashed into the bottom of the canyon, forming a huge crater that was several hundred feet deep. Whoosh! Whoosh! Xiao He, with the blood immortal sword and the sacrificial death sword, hurried over from the edge of the canyon. When she saw the deep pit below the canyon, her expression changed greatly. Holy **T. This brat's heaven-crushing tribulation is way too terrifying. He'll be fine, right? Xiao He quickly rushed into the hole. Not long after, Xiao He dragged out a charred human figure from the depths of the pit. "Boss, is Master dead?" The blood fairy sword cautiously approached and touched Zhuan's body with its hilt, but Zhuan remained unmoved. "You jinx! What are you talking about?" Xiao He raised her little claw and slapped the blood immortal sword, causing it to cry out. She then looked at Zhuan with a serious expression. At this moment, Zhuan's aura was so weak that it was almost undetectable. However, Xiao He was mentally connected to Zhuan. He could sense that Zhuan was still alive. Suddenly, the charred human figure opened its eyes, and a bright light burst out from its eyes. Then he sat down cross-legged and the aura on his body continued to rise. "Looks like he's fine." Xiao He asked the blood immortal sword and the sacrificial death sword to stay away from Zhuowen. She stood aside and quietly watched Zhuowen cultivate. Zhuowen's aura became increasingly vast. When he crossed tribulation, he had already broken through to the early divine transformation realm. But now his aura was still growing, and it was growing at an extremely fast speed. Early stage divine transformation realm, middle stage divine transformation realm, late stage divine transformation realm. Only when he reached the peak of the divine fetus transformation realm did Zhuowen's rising aura slow down and completely disappear. He had overcome the heaven-crushing tribulation with great difficulty, and he had even broken through to the peak stage of the divine fetal transformation stage. However, Zhuowen did not get up. Instead, he continued to cultivate. In his soul, the Tyward stone was boiling. Mysterious and powerful characters were constantly pouring into his mind, allowing him to absorb and digest them. That's right, these were the cultivation techniques of the primordial grand mist technique. The primordial technique had a very high threshold. One could only cultivate it after breaking through the heavens. Moreover, it was also extremely profound. But for Zhuowen, who had a high comprehension ability, comprehending the primordial grand mist technique wasn't difficult. Not to mention, he had already studied the primordial grand mist technique countless times. In addition, he had the foundation of his self-created primordial mantra. All right, it's time for us to return to the main city. Zhuowen smiled as he took out a new set of clothes from the great world. After putting them on, he summoned Xiao He, the blood immortal sword, and the death sacrifice sword back into the great world. Then, he took out a divine ship and quickly flew toward the main city. "You must be the one who killed Diwenxing. You're only at the pinnacle of the spirit transformation stage. After fusing with the fire toad's power, you should be able to reach the mid-stage or late stage of the heaven-trampling transformation stage. It's not difficult to kill Diwenxing." The black-robed man sneered. The killing intent in his eyes was no longer concealed. Lu Yichuan's expression changed slightly. "Diwenxing is from the Morong family? So you don't know?" "That's right. Diwenxing was sent by my young master. I thought that with Diwenxing's strength, it would be easy for him to obtain the fire toad. I didn't expect him to die in Yunjin Hill." "What a piece of trash. Now, I'll give you a chance. Hand over the fire toad and kill yourself. I'll leave your corpse intact," the black-robed man said indifferently. Lu Yichuan's expression darkened, but he laughed loudly. "You're too confident. In my opinion, you might not be a match for me." After saying that, Lu Yichuan stomped his right foot and shot toward the black-robed man like a meteor. "You really don't know what's good for you." The black-robed man sneered. His right hand turned into a claw and surged with strange black thunderbolts. The moment Lu Yichuan arrived, his right hand turned into a claw and attacked Lu Yichuan. Lu Yichuan was not to be outdone. He clenched his right hand into a fist and punched out. A blazing aura spread out and formed a terrifying sea of fire in the sky. Lu Yichuan was very smart. The moment he attacked the black-robed man, he had moved the battlefield away from the Clear Heart Society. Bang, bang, bang. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.